It is 6:30. This is Peter Pritchard. I have the honor of being the chairman of the Morrisville Planning and Zoning Board and call to order our meeting for August 2020. I'm going to ask Secretary Marty to do a roll call for us.
Member Acharya?
Yes,
present.
present.
Did you hear him? Okay.
Could you hear me?
Vice Chairman Langston?
Present.
Member Sack?
Present.
Member Toterai?
Present.
Member Michael?
Present.
Member Roebuck? Present. And Chairman Pritchard?
Present. Did we hear Sanjay?
Quorum is present.
Okay. We heard Sanjay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I heard Sanjay.
So our two alternates will be participating but not voting this evening. Any changes to the agenda from your perspective, Michelle?
No, Chairman.
Okay. Then I entertain a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
I move, Lee, go ahead.
I think that was Lee making a motion to adopt tonight's agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Sanjay. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Member Acharya?
Yes.
Vice Chairman
Can you
Langston?
hear me? Aye.
Member Sack?
Aye.
Member Toterai?
Aye.
And Chairman Pritchard?
Aye. So we've adopted the
Motion
agenda.
passed unanimously.
Thank you. Any changes to the minutes as distributed from staff or from members? Please speak now. Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the July meeting. Don't all shout at once.
Make a motion to
Chairman,
approve
I
the
do have a
minutes.
motion in the chat box.
Okay. Thank you.
Did he make the motion? And has it been seconded?
So I have a motion and a second. We'll do the roll call vote. Thank you.
Member Acharya?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Langston?
Aye.
Member Sack?
Aye.
Member Toterai?
Aye.
Chairman Pritchard?
Aye. Thank you. The minutes are approved. And thank everybody who's listening, watching, and is present for bearing with us in these interesting times. A little bit more mechanical than we used to be, but we'll get there. Item 5 is public comment. Is there anybody signed up wishing to speak in general to the planning board tonight?
Mr. Chairman, we did receive 2 emails that we are accepting in for public comments. The first is from Steve Latterdale, who lives at 2104 Glade Valley Lane in Morrisville. It reads as follows. As a reminder, the town's strategic plan includes an invitation to work collaboratively with Wake County Public School System to ensure Morrisville's public school needs are met. Wake County Public School System is explicit. Your 813 agenda item includes Morrisville Land Use Plan frequently asked questions. Question 7. Many of the schools in the area are at or over intended capacity. How does the plan support new schools in Morrisville? I suggest changing the question in Fact 7 to replace the word schools with the phrase Wake County Public School System schools and WCPSS schools. If so, question 7 would be, many of the Wake County Public School System schools in the area are at or over their intended capacity. How does the plan support the new Wake County Public School System schools in Morrisville? With regard to Fact 8 and the answer that less restrictive, and allows uses such as residential and schools west of Chapel Hill Road. Omitting the term WCPSS suggests this is an attempt to focus on private and charter schools. In question 8, when discussing schools, please clarify if you mean WCPSS schools or private and charter schools, but probably not Wake County Public School System schools. That's the second comment is from Glenda S. Top and Associates. Glenda Top is from address is 4139 Garden Lake Drive in Raleigh, North Carolina. Her comments read, my name is Glenda Top. I am a land use consultant working with a property owner in Morrisville who wants to share his thoughts with the board as you deliberate the draft land use plan. We do not want to address a particular site, but the need for multifamily development within Morrisville. As is the case in many communities across the country, Morrisville's population is aging and diversifying. We see retiring baby boomers, professional workers choosing to wait longer to start a family or not have a family at all, an increasing number of single-person households, and growth in racial and ethnic diversity. These trends show that the demographic changes being experienced here and elsewhere are increasingly accompanied by changes in household preferences that impact housing, transportation, and other lifestyle choices. This future land use plan offers an opportunity to identify ways that Morrisville can maintain its high-quality suburban community experience while also accommodating the lifestyle preferences of this changing population. Land available for development is limited by formal agreements with neighboring communities and other factors such as the airport. Morrisville basically knows where future development will be occurring. Given this, many of the new projects in Morrisville will increasingly come in the form of infill development and redevelopment of existing properties. It is going to be important for Morrisville to capture the next generation employees by offering next-generation housing. The town will want to offer high-quality housing in suitable areas that can accommodate a variety of lifestyles, household ages, cultures, market preferences, and incomes. This includes dwellings for aging seniors and empty nesters, multi-generational households, young professionals, young families, and members of the local workforce. Housing options and variety can take the form of different sized lots, different sized homes, different price points, different types of homes, and different types of home features, such as housing designs that support aging seniors or multi-generational households. Given the changes in demographics, it is critical that Morrisville provide more housing choices for all residents, specifically multifamily housing. Given the trends of today, more people are choosing to rent versus own. This includes singles, young families, and seniors. Our region's growing renter pool is buoyed by the Triangle's diverse pandemic-resistant demand drivers, continued renters, heavily millennial growth, plus 6 times the U.S. average since 2013, relative affordability versus our Southeast peers, and in-migration growth amplified by COVID-19. Specifically in Morrisville and Northwest Cary, collectively the Northwest Cary-Morrisville submarket, we have seen population multiply 5.3 times since 2000, and with a young to mid-30 professionals seeking Class A rental options, as reflected in submarket occupancy consistently at or above 95%. Based on demographic trends and growing flight to the best suburbs, we believe the demand for rental product in Morrisville will far exceed availability and creating leakage to other nearby nodes. As identified above, it is important that multifamily development be equally dispersed throughout the town and have access to major thoroughfares. As the board reviews the proposed future land use plan, we ask you to make sure that Morrisville is offering an adequate amount of opportunities for multifamily development throughout the town. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this information to the board. That's it.
Thank you, Marty. And I assume there's nobody standing outside in the foyer. Thank you, Brandon.
No.
So we will move on to item 6, which is new business with public comment, and ask Chris to introduce this.
Yes, good evening. Let me switch to the slides. Here we go. Okay, so good evening. Tonight I'm presenting item 2020-214-0, which is a land use plan and zoning map amendment for 0 Morrisville Carpenter Road. I just want to say I've been working with the applicants since probably late 2018, so I'm very excited that their application is before the board tonight. So this aerial image shows an outline of the subject parcel in the red outline there. This is located just west of Town Hall Drive and Indian Creek Greenway. The property is currently undeveloped. The requests are for the following: to amend the land use map to the designation of institutional, and to amend the zoning map to conditional residential transition zoning district. So this is just a zoomed out aerial image. You can see the property. This picture was taken in May of this year. The property itself I did not highlight, but it's between the two kind of sandy, dirty areas, just west of Town Hall Drive, just north of Morrisville Square. And this is just to give you an idea of the kind of development going on around right now. So just some background on the area. To the north, the property zone, Parks, Greenway, open space. This is where there's a town park and also the town center core stormwater control measures being built currently. Just the property directly to the east is a town park. South is the Morrisville Square Shopping Center and Morrisville Carpenter Road, and then to the west is the Thornberry subdivision, which is currently under construction. So that'd be single-family attached and detached housing. So this slide just provides some general information about the property. Some of the highlights are that the property is just over 2 acres in size. It is not annexed into town limits. It's currently undeveloped. I'll note that the applicants have stated that they intend on constructing a place of worship. So on to some of the uses proposed by the applicant. First slide here just is a list of uses that they have stated would not be permitted with this rezoning. And I will note on the right is the sketch plan provided by the applicant. And I can come back to this later if we have any questions about specific uses or the sketch plan. This slide shows the rest of the proposed conditions, and I really just want to highlight numbers 3 and 7, or number 2 and 7. Number 2 limits the overall size of a place of worship which could be constructed on the property, and then number 7 does not allow overflow parking in surrounding subdivisions. So as far as transportation-related items go, the Morrisville Carpenter Road is scheduled to be widened, and the site has dedicated the necessary right-of-way for that project. A transportation impact analysis was performed and found that the development meets the UDO level of service. So any other transportation improvements or payment in lieu will be determined once a site plan is submitted for this site. So potential transportation impacts. This slide was generated by the department's transportation planner. It's just intended to let you compare the expected daily trips for several different uses. The slide compares the daily trips from a place of worship with both single-family and attached and detached. And we chose single-family, detached, and attached to compare the intended use just because that felt like another use on the property, a potential use on the property. So staff does recommend approval of both requests, and I'll just read the reasons on the slide. Number 1, the amendments are required by change conditions. So the current zoning of the property allows only an emergency services station, which was not constructed on the property as previously planned. Number 2, the property directly west of the site is also zoned conditional residential transition. This property shares a common access road with the subject property. Therefore, the requested rezoning is compatible with the zoning in the surrounding area. Number 3, the requested land use amendment and zoning map amendments would allow for development that is compatible with the developments in the town center, thereby resulting in a logical and orderly development pattern. Number 4, the property is located along a major thoroughfare in the town center, which is typically considered a suitable location for the types of uses permitted in the residential transition district. So I have provided a draft motion template for your use. I have no other slides in my presentation. Be happy to take questions. I'd also note that we have 4 members of the applicant team. 3 of them are with us in chambers tonight, and then 1 is participating remotely. So these include the rabbi, the project engineer, land use consultant, and a traffic engineer. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Since you good people have come here tonight, would you like to speak?
Chris,
Linda would like
when
to
I
speak?
speak, yeah, is this when I go?
Yeah, so there's one of the members that's participating remotely is Glenda Top, and I think she'd like to speak, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to recognize her.
Please go ahead, Ms.
Chris,
Top.
if you could stop sharing the screen.
And hopefully I'm doing this correctly because I haven't really done this much, so bear with me. My name is Glenda Top with Glenda S. Top and Associates, and I am the planning consultant representing Chabad of Morrisville, and they are the applicant. And Chris has done an excellent job going over the proposal. What I'd like to do tonight is just hit a couple of key points. As Chris said, this has been a project that I've been working on for quite some time. The rabbi who was in the audience tonight, this is a site that they have chosen to hopefully be approved for a religious establishment. Again, there are other uses that are proposed. The current land use designation for the property is a park, and we are proposing the land use designation as institutional. As Chris pointed out, currently the property is zoned conditional, office, and institutional, and only one use is permitted for the site, which is an emergency response center. I'm sure you all know that at one time the town had planned on locating it here. This is no longer going to be the case since it's been located on a nearby parcel, thus making it one of the main reasons for asking for the land use plan amendment and the rezoning. Given the development patterns in the area, we do feel that the proposed land use amendment is appropriate. Just to talk briefly on the zoning request, we are asking for conditional residential transition. This use allows both residential and institutional uses and does include the ability for a place of worship. The property to the adjacent property, Thornberry, is also zoned conditional residential transition. As Chris pointed out, there is a sketch plan that shows the proposed building, parking, but again, keeping in mind that this is just one potential use of the property, because it's important that this not be a single-use rezoning that is currently on the site. The development will comply with the requirements of the UDO, which, as you know, addresses a lot of different issues, including environmental concerns. We do feel that the use being proposed and the other possible uses are appropriate for this location. And I'm going to just briefly summarize pretty much what Chris pointed out. Before I do that, I do want to thank staff for working very diligently with this group. It's a very important rezoning to the applicant. and we've worked very hard with the town to come up with the zoning conditions and the commitment in order for staff to feel comfortable recommending approval of the request. So just briefly, again, we feel that both amendments are justified due to the changing conditions. Again, only one use is currently approved for the site, and this use is never going to be built on the site because it is already at another location. We feel that both the land use plan amendment and the rezoning is compatible with the surrounding development. And again, as Chris pointed out, it is adjacent to a major thoroughfare, and the uses that are proposed, we feel, are compatible with what's in the area. What we are asking for is the board to recommend approval at their meeting tonight. Also want to point out that the applicant is here, the rabbi is here meeting in the building, the engineer, Danny Howell, and also representatives of the folks that did the traffic study, so that if you have questions, of course, I'm available, but they're also physically present. And lastly, I do want to thank the town for letting me present tonight remotely. That meant a lot to me, so thank you very much. And that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Top. So I take it that we can carry on and ask the board members if they have any comments or questions, and then anybody here can answer. Perhaps Ms. Top can. So, Lee, I'm going to ask you if you have any comments, questions, discussion on this item.
Thank you, Peter. The only questions I had were about some of these other proposed conditions, particularly the stuff about no vehicular and pedestrian cross access. I guess my question is that something that would normally be required that we're waiving as part of this? Is that something that's impossible due to the topography of the land? And remember, it's pretty hilly over there. I guess I'm wondering why those are written with the shall. Just the specific wording of it is, I'm just wondering why it's there.
Sure, good question. So the conditions in question, I think, are number 3 and number 4. So number 3 would prevent cross-access to the town park that is just west of the intersection of Town Hall Drive and Morrisville Carpenter Road. Generally, these things would be required upon site plan submittal. I think there was some discussion between staff and the applicant whether that would be an appropriate connection. Our engineering team, the town engineering staff reviewed it, determined it would be a highly improbable connection due to some of the elevation changes and the riparian buffer that runs between town property and the subject property you're hearing tonight. As far as number 4, that would be cross-access to the Thornberry subdivision that's currently under construction. There's actually a stub road coming from the Thornberry subdivision into the subject property, which has sidewalks, has a public access connection easement, and the rest of the property that of Thornberry subdivision that is adjacent to this subject property is all tree preservation area or commonly owned HOA open space. So staff actually recommended we add that condition just to prevent the need for a cross-access waiver application when it gets to site plan. Just felt that cross-access, the intent was already satisfied by the road connection and sidewalk connection, and that any other connection to tree preservation area was undesirable.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was still going to be connecting to the sidewalk because there was talk about people walking there.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty much the only question that I really had.
Thank you, Lee. Any other member wish to comment on this?
Yeah, hey, this is Tim Kilroy. I have a question around the items that weren't excluded. So I see that there was the multi-family dwelling was excluded, but it's not the attached family home. What's the fallback position? Is there, of not going with the proposed use? You mentioned other uses. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And then the question around that was there a study like you did the traffic study around usage for schools, impact on schools? So you can address those two.
So I think I heard two questions. One was if it's rezoned to conditional RT and we knock out the ones that are voluntarily excluded, what else could go on this site?
Okay.
And then we want to talk about the traffic study.
And traffic
So I
study.
think Chris is hastily thumbing through his
Well,
video here.
Yeah, actually, I don't have one in front of me. I'll respond to some of the other uses. I do not have a UDO in front of me. One of the attachments on your items listed uses that would be allowed, would not be allowed after this. Okay, so I have a UDO now. So let me refresh. So uses that would be allowed afterward include, I'm just going to list them: community garden, single family attached and detached, club or lodge, community center, cultural facility, place of worship, public park, utility facility minor, antenna co-location, several other telecom-related uses, and one more is a bed and breakfast, and that is the extent of the list.
I appreciate that. I guess the more specific around the question of the use around either single-family attached or detached. Has there been any study similar to what you did with transportation around impact to schools? So if you went that way, what would be the impact on the schools that are kind of topped out now? So we'd be interested in that. And then, secondarily to that, would you be willing to exclude one or more of those uses?
So, question I understood it as, has there been any study on the impact of schools if the site were to be developed as single-family attached or detached?
That's correct.
Okay. I do not have those numbers in my presentation. I would have to look at the density of the property. So no, I do not have specific numbers. Does the applicant have anything like to add to that question?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Okay, thank you. Of course, the applicant is also present. If there are uses that are, that you would like to consider us deleting, I'm sure we would be interested in doing that. The biggest thing is we were looking not to have a single-use zoning application, although the use plan for the property is a place of worship. Chabad is currently using office space, and they've been looking for a site for quite some time. And as Chris said, we've been working on this site for quite some time. The intent was to try to find a few other uses just in case something fell through, given what happened with the current zoning and that use not being built on this site. But if there's a concern with some of the uses being proposed, I'm sure the applicant would be more than willing to consider deleting a use. Now, and the rabbis in the audience, and could also address that. As you see from the sketch plan, what's been laid out is the Chabad and what they want to build at some point in time.
Yeah. And so I guess that the specific request would be, would you entertain the idea of excluding the other home uses, so single family detached or attached home uses, and then coming from the already dense population in that area. That's just a question I have for you guys.
So, Rabbi,
I might turn to the engineer, Danny.
or whoever wants to talk.
If Mr. Howell, if you could just give us your name and address just for the record, thank you.
My name is Danny Howell with Real Engineering. My address is 2904 Plaza Place, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27612.
Thank you.
To help address that, some of the uses that town staff, and this is a very challenging site with the geometry of the site, triangular shape. It's surrounded by riparian buffer on one side that has pretty severe topographic issues on the site as well. So 3 of the most viable uses on the property would be single family, attached or detached, and or place of worship, a use like us, where you can design the building around the topography of the site and then create parking around it. You get some really unique buildings a lot of times when you have a site like that. Again, talking with town staff, I don't think we necessarily want to take out the option of a single family attached or detached from the use, just to avoid having another single use allowable for a site. Again, I don't think it's economically feasible for anyone to go in and build single family attached or detached houses. Otherwise, Beezer, when they did Thornberry next door, would have also purchased this property and done the same, rezoned and developed it as single family attached or detached as well. So I don't know that it necessarily needs to be removed from a use, but again, town staff may, I don't know if they have an objection to removing it as well.
It may add, just to follow up from staff, didn't include school numbers, should include those. But I will note that if this rezoning is approved, the site plan will have to resemble in substantial conformance with the sketch plan submitted. So that was a slide on my PowerPoint, which I think I can bring back up if you need to, and basically just shows 1 2-story building and then a parking lot surrounding it. The other item I'll note is that in the residential transition zoning district, the max density is 8 dwelling units per acre. That's for single family detached and attached. The site itself is a little over 2 acres and has a riparian buffer running along the eastern side of the site. So hopefully that gives you a little more clarification on potential school-age children if the site was developed for residential. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So we'll think about that as the discussion continues. You okay with that, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Anybody else like to make a comment? Sanjay?
Yeah, sure. My question was more to do with the expansion of the road itself in front of the building. Brad, do you have any idea of when we are going to make that a 4-lane all the way to the railway lines or across?
I guess a more general question is, did you take into account the fact that Morrisville Carpenter Road is going to be widened and changed? I'm sure you did.
Correct.
Yeah, I was just asking the timeline.
We definitely have considered another impact to our site is the amount of grading that's associated with Morrisville Carpenter Road. So there's a significant temporary construction easement on our property, on our property. And again, yes, we've had to consider everything we've done with the new grades of Morrisville Carpenter, and we plan to come in after Morrisville Carpenter is widened, and again has the infrastructure, the public sidewalks, all of that for our property as well.
Very good.
Thank you. That was my question.
Be too much of an impact on our property to try to go in before the town does their project.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Kenneth, any questions?
No questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Josh.
I just have one. Is there currently, this is not really pertaining to the application, but is there a synagogue in Morrisville right now? I don't believe there is, correct? So this would be
Rabbi. That's a perfect question for him.
Thank you for giving me a question that I'm able to answer. Rabbi Kotler, 105 Trumbell Circle, right here in Morrisville. This will be the first synagogue actually in western Wake County. We currently are in Grace Park, so we are operating one of the storefronts in Grace Park, just a few blocks away. So this, God willing, would be kind of a seamless transition into a new site. But the first in western Wake County, it's a small, even with all the growth in the area, it's still a relatively very small Jewish community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Morrisville is so diverse already that this just adds richness to that diversity that is Morrisville. So that's great. And that's great news for Morrisville, first synagogue in Morrisville.
I agree.
Chris? No questions. All right. So I have a couple of questions. And probably Mr. Howell will be able to answer. It's not in a floodplain, is it? My memory is it's fairly high up. So.
Correct. The floodplain is on the other side of Morrisville Carpenter Road. So it's just, we have riparian buffer and a stream on our side, but the floodplain begins on the other side of Morrisville Carpenter Road.
I was thinking of the stream between you and the park on your side of Morrisville Carpenter, but that's good to know. Do you anticipate, I know this is not a site plan hearing, but do you anticipate having traffic lights at that intersection?
At which intersection?
Sears Road, because you've got a four-way there. You've got the Morrisville Market to the south.
I don't. I had to look back at the Morrisville Carpenter.
I'll help answer that. In this area, there will not be a stoplight once the road is widened.
So
there'll be a divided median.
Okay. But you'll be able to turn left into and out of this road?
No. Let me try to pull the PowerPoint back. How do I get the PowerPoint?
I'm actually looking at the plan now, and then the current plan shows an opening there.
You can't. It is.
But if you go
down there as well.
So let me see.
But if you take a look at the road expansion plan, the one that Brad showed us way back, that does not have it's only one-way turns.
Yeah, so if you can see the PowerPoint slide up, this will show basically what the road widening is going to look like. So their access point will actually be, I don't know if anybody can see my mouse, but there's a little yellow stub road into where it's currently being developed. They will have a driveway off of that future road. They will not have access on the Morrisville Carpenter Road. And actually, now that I look at it, they will be able to take a left. There'll be a full movement intersection from the exit of that road. So they'll have a.
Pull up the conditional rezoning exhibit.
Yeah.
It shows a closer up.
Yeah, there we go.
If you go to the northern part of that, I guess it's cut off. Never mind.
It's cut off a little bit, but yeah.
Yes, it's a full access movement out of Sears Drive onto Morrisville Carpenter.
And it is, Josh Ranke with Ramey Kemp and Associates. We did the traffic study. Right now, there's no consideration for a signal there as part of the roadway widening project or any improvements associated with this. So it is a full access, unsignalized intersection. A big part of that is the type of development there. The residential that'll be there typically has very distinct peaks. And then this will be actually more of a complementary use where it's got totally different peaks, which helps traffic out there. But it's probably not likely to hit NCDOT warrants for a signal anytime soon.
Thank you. Those were my questions. Anybody on the board, any other questions, comments before we pull for a motion?
I have a question, Peter. This is Ken. Looking at that the map that you just had up, is that stub road going to be the only means of ingress and egress to the Chabad?
Let me find.
That is correct. The Chabad, our site will only have access from the Holden Court off of Holdford Court off of Sears Drive. As part of the Thornberry subdivision adjacent to us, they are providing a public stub street, Holdford Court, to our property. and that'll be we will not have direct access onto Morrisville Carpenter.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right. If anybody would like to make a motion.
I'll be happy to make a motion.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Yeah, I'll need to pull up the particular article. Brad, do I use the first one you sent us? Oh, sorry. Marty, you sent us the first one, right?
Sorry.
Or is it
in
on
the motions.
Yeah, I've got two emails from her, so.
Yeah, Secretary Saunders sent a draft for your consideration.
The second one says revised. I would say use that one.
Yep. It opens up here. Come on.
So we'll be looking for two motions.
No, actually,
Three. Thank you.
consistency statement.
Okay. There are only two motions in this
Two
particular
motions and a consistency statement.
Oh, there is only one. So I'm reading the revised template that Marty sent out. It says land use plan amendment and consistency statement. That's it. So there is a zone map amendment as well. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I hereby motion that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval to the Town Council of Resolution 2020-214-0A pertaining to the amendment of the land use plan for 0 Morrisville Carpenter Road, located west of the intersection of Morrisville Carpenter Road and Town Hall Drive to institutional, CPA 000086-2020.
Thank you, Sanjay. Do I have a second for that motion? And seconded by Lee Langston, Vice Chair. Thank you, Lee. Any discussion of the motion? So I'll call for a vote to be called by Marty.
Member Achario,
Yay.
Vice Chairman Langston,
Aye.
Member Sack,
Aye.
Member Toterai,
Aye.
and Chairman Pritchard.
Aye.
The motion was approved unanimously.
Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, we're not there yet.
I know.
I'm going to make the.
Try and contain your
I'll make
excitement this time.
Yes.
Well,
Sanjay.
actually, I'm sure the rabbi's more excited than I am.
Sanjay, please go ahead.
Okay. Consistency statement. As required by General Statute 160A-383, I hereby make a motion to recommend approval of Resolution 2020-214-0B to the Morrisville Town Council pertaining to the adoption of a plan consistency review statement for a zoning map amendment for 0 Morrisville Carpenter Road, located west of intersection of Town Hall Drive and Morrisville Carpenter Road, to the conditional residential transition zoning district, REZ 00085-2020, based on the following. The proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and is in the public interest because the proposed amendment supports the following policies in the town's adopted land use plan. A, policy 1A, promote growth and development that contributes to and builds upon the town's overall image as a well-planned, attractive, livable, and unique community in the Triangle region. Policy 2A, promote development that fosters a sense of place by improving the character of the character of the built environment, including visually appealing buildings, streetscapes, amenities, and public space.
Thank you, Sanjay. Have a second to that motion. Seconded by Member Sack. Any discussion of the motion? If not, I'll ask Marty to do a roll call vote.
Member Acharya?
Yay.
Vice Chairman Langston?
Aye.
Member Sack?
Aye.
Member Toterai?
Aye.
And Chairman Pritchard.
Aye.
The motion to approve the consistency statement was unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay. On to the last one.
You're on a roll, Sanjay, please.
Zoning map amendment. I hereby motion that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval to the Town Council of Ordinance 2020-214-0, approving a zoning map amendment for 0 Morrisville Carpenter Road, located west of the intersection of Morrisville Carpenter Road and Town Hall Drive, REZ 00085-2020.
Thank you. Do I have a second for that motion? Seconded by Tim Toterai. Thank you. Any discussion of the motion? If not, we'll ask Marty to do the roll call vote, please.
Okay, Member Acharya?
Yay.
Vice Chairman Langston?
Aye.
Member Sack?
Aye.
Member Toterai?
Aye.
And Chairman Pritchard.
Aye.
The motion to approve the zoning map amended was unanimously.
Thank you, Marty. So I think that will conclude this item. I'd like to thank the members of the audience here, Rabbi and the two engineers. And thank you, Ms. Top, for appearing in Morrisville. I know you have a long experience of Morrisville, including some of the original debate between Cary and Morrisville as to who had jurisdiction over what we call the Morrisville donut.
So I will also, I'll end with this. My very first job was the first planner in Morrisville, and that was back in 1977. So, yes, I go back a long way.
Very good.
But thank you again for this. And like I said, staff was just very helpful. And, you know, it's challenging times. And again, thank everyone.
Welcome to the community.
Wish you the very best with your project.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good night.
So we are going to take a brief pause, let these good people escape, and prepare for our next item. And I think it's only fair that I remind everybody that we are not going to be on mute. So this is not like a regular recess. So we'll give staff 5 or 10 minutes to get things up and running.
And our sign code consultant did log on about a minute ago, but if you could give us a minute or two still to sanitize, that would be great.
If you scroll down with your
Yeah,
mouse wheel.
I'm turning the wheel and not getting anything.
Okay, if you need us to, we could forward the slides for us if you just want to tell us next slide.
Yeah, just say next slide.
That's fine with me. Sorry to make this more complicated than it needs to be.
Oh, not a problem. Brad, do you want me to do that or you?
Whatever, it's easier. Doesn't matter. I'm happy to do it. Yeah, I'm already touching it, so.
So whenever you're ready, Chairman.
Okay, so Brad, are you going to introduce this, or are you just the driver?
I am just the driver. I'll let Michelle do the honor.
So, Michelle, I guess a big question before we start is, what are you expecting from us this evening?
So we started the sign code update quite a while ago, actually back in 2017, in response to a Supreme Court case related to First Amendment issues. And we contracted with the law firm of Ansel Glink to assist us with that update. There have been some starts and stops as other projects and initiatives have taken over, but this is a project that we really would like to wrap up. We recognize that it's been some time, though, since the Planning and Zoning Board has seen anything related to this item. So we really just wanted to take an opportunity to kind of do what we're calling a refresh. And I think for probably about half of you, this is going to be new. Just kind of going over the purpose for the update and some of the major impacts and changes that you'll be seeing when the draft code comes before you. So really just giving that broad overview, providing some background and context, because we do suspect that, well, we are planning on bringing the formal draft to you here very soon. I think at the end of the meeting today, we'll be talking with the board a little bit about some timing on that. But really, I would just, if I could just hand it over to Attorney Greg Jones with Ansel Glink. He's really just wanting to provide a broad overview, not really looking for anything particular from the Planning and Zoning Board tonight, but obviously if you have questions, we're here to answer those.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And good evening, everyone. Excited to be here tonight in Chicago. I would be more excited to be with you in Morrisville if circumstances were a little bit different. But as Michelle said, my name is Greg Jones. I'm a partner with the law firm of Ansel Glink, and I would like to thank the board for their feedback and guidance to date on this project. As Michelle said, it's been a bit of a long road that has featured several detours, including a pandemic. So who knew? But we're looking forward to helping the town accomplish what it set out to do way back when we started this in 2017. So we're not going to do a real deep dive into the revised sign code tonight. Instead, tonight's more of an opportunity to refresh the board on where we've been, why we're doing this, and what comes next. So a good place to start is the purpose. So why are we doing this? And the town, as Michelle noted, started this effort primarily in response to the Supreme Court decision in Reed versus Town of Gilbert. Now, that particular decision really turned local sign regulation on its head, not just in Morrisville, not just in North Carolina, but really across the entire country. Before the Reed decision, many, if not most communities, enforced regulations specifically based on sign types. So, for example, communities would have regulations that apply to signs for drive-throughs, real estate signs for sale signs, garage signs, things like that. This was common practice across the country for many years, and up until 2015, there was good law supporting this approach. Now, Reed caught pretty much everyone by surprise, and it found that these types of regulations were what's called a content-based regulation. And in the case of the community that was sued in the Reed case, Gilbert, Arizona, it invalidated their sign code in significant portions. So content-based regulations, just a little bit of background, they regulate a sign based on what it says. So in other words, what the sign's message is. And the Reed Court found that, for example, regulations that allowed more for sale signs to be located on a property than, say, garage sale signs constituted a content-based regulation. In that case, the town had made it more difficult for a resident to communicate about their garage sale than it was to communicate about their home being sold. And the court found that this was a form of content-based regulation. That wasn't previously the case prior to Reed, but it's a brave new world. So Morrisville sign code, like many other communities, currently includes many of the same types of regulations that the Reed Court found to be unconstitutional. So one of the primary focuses of the sign code update was to replace these content-based regulations with legal, defensible, content-neutral standards. So these new standards, instead of regulating a drive-through sign or a for sale sign, they'll regulate signs based on their size, their location, construction materials in some cases, and similar criteria that are completely unrelated to a sign's message. The sign code update was also intended to address some lingering issues, administrative issues that town staff had identified, including how to address banners, pole signs, gas station signage to a certain extent, and a few others. And we also wanted to make the code obviously more user-friendly. This is a document that's a living and breathing document, and there's all sorts of customers approaching it from different angles. So we want to make it as accessible as possible. If we could skip to the next slide, please. So here's an overview of where we've been and where we're going. The project started in earnest in the summer of 2017. A necessary first step in this project, like any code project, is public outreach. And that's what we did first. We conducted several days of stakeholder interviews with folks that interact with and are impacted by the sign code on a regular basis. That includes developers, home builders, realtors, town council members, some planning and zoning board members, including Chairman Pritchard, staff. We met with sign vendors, property managers, a Chamber of Commerce representative or two, and several others. We tried to cast a wide net to solicit feedback on the current code, and specifically what was working and what wasn't. And we took that feedback and factored it into some of the recommendations that are going to be back before the Planning and Zoning Board next month. All of that feedback was distilled down into a key issues report, which I'm sure no one here actually remembers, but it was presented to the Planning and Zoning Board in late 2017, and there was some discussion on it. And another copy was also included in tonight's packet just as a refresh. But the report is really important. It provides the basis and support for the code amendments that the town is going to consider in the coming weeks. So after tonight's meeting, we plan to present the revised sign code to this group again in September with an eye towards town council public hearing and eventual adoption later this year. Next slide, please. Okay, now that we have the roadmap, I'll just use the next few slides to highlight some of the code updates, larger changes. This is what is likely going to be coming before you next month. So this table identifies just a few examples of content-based sign designations found in the town's current sign code. A lot of these signs fall under the heading of temporary signs, which includes signs for special events, for sale signs, contractor signs, and a few others. These regulations need to be replaced. So that's our first step with the code update. And we spent significant time evaluating how best to reclassify these signs to minimize the town's legal liability while also preserving, importantly, the town's ability to meet its regulatory goals. And the idea here wasn't to replace content-based regulations with no regulations. That's not a good outcome. I think everyone would agree. Instead, we're trying to preserve and enhance the town's regulations, but in a legal way. So that's been a primary goal. And we also wanted to align the town's political sign regulations with North Carolina statutory requirements. Next slide, please. Another issue we discovered while reviewing the sign code was its tendency to regulate signage based on the type of business. And this is a problematic approach for some of the reasons we already touched on. This arguably qualifies as content-based regulation. And you could reasonably see an office user wondering why he or she is entitled to less signage than the medical office user who's located next door, which in some cases the regulations allowed. So to head off these types of claims, we've reworked the sign code to rely primarily on a property's zoning designation and not its use. This is a tried and true and much more defensible method that provides strong defense to claims that the town's code is content-based. There are a couple different ways to do this, and I think when the Planning and Zoning Board discussed this last, staff had teased the idea of maybe setting up sign districts. So instead of going just by the zoning district, you'd create a whole new map that identifies corridors or different areas in the town, regardless of their zoning designation, and then applies sign regulations based on that. That's also a legal approach. It's a bit more complex. And in this application, there didn't seem to be as much of a benefit to go to that level of complexity. The town zoning districts are well established. They pretty well track the character of the neighborhoods. So in this instance, we decided to rely on an existing map, the zoning map, instead of creating a whole new one. Next slide, please. So we also reviewed the sign code's purpose statements and reworked it to emphasize both the content neutrality of the regulations and the legitimate reasons the town has for regulating signs. And these are real, and many of them relate to public safety concerns. Now, these purpose provisions are very important. They sound like a lot of flowery language, and in some cases they are. But in the event of a legal challenge, that flowery language can provide quite a shield. We also reworked the town's illuminated sign regulations and spent significant time incorporating content neutral modern signage definitions into the UDO. And again, definitions are not the most exciting topic, but they really are the front line of defense when any town faces a challenge, whether it's based on the First Amendment or any other issue. Next slide, please. Thanks. And finally, we address some substantive regulations as well. The updated sign code will prohibit new pole signs and signage in the right-of-way. These are, again, public safety concerns. They'll include provisions addressing abandoned signs and when they need to be removed. The code will include enhanced landscaping requirements around the base of monument signs. And again, we did all of this with an eye towards trying to make the new sign code as accessible as reasonably possible to residents and customers. Next slide, please. So stakeholder engagement, I touched on this earlier. This slide really just sets forth who we sat down with and talked both at the beginning of this process and who staff is continuing to reach out to as we get into the home stretch here. And some of those efforts are still underway. You'll see it's kind of a broad slice of interest groups. These are people who apply for sign permits. These are people who pull their hair out when they hear about signage requirements, and everybody else in between. So we wanted to get as much feedback as we could here. Next slide, please. And the feedback from the stakeholders has largely been positive to date, particularly when compared with signage regulations that are enforced by some neighboring communities. And this really matters. Everybody likely knows that businesses talk, and the regulatory environment absolutely factors into decisions concerning where a business will locate. And by and large, the feedback we received from the stakeholders is that Morrisville is doing a pretty good job, which is fantastic. And we have worked to incorporate some of the additional feedback that stakeholders have provided concerning flexibility for promotional signage, recognizing that the most critical time for any new business is really the run-up to their grand opening and the weeks that immediately follow. And that's really what a lot of the promotional signage regulations are. And we've also worked to find considerate ways to support the town's businesses without compromising the town's aesthetic or its character. Next slide, please. So next steps, after tonight's meeting, we will work on finalizing the draft sign code. Staff, if they haven't already, is going to have it up on the town's website. Also going to be circulating links to stakeholders and interested members of the public to solicit their feedback, starting soon and running through the next planning and zoning board meeting, as well as town council. And we'll continue the discussion from there, again, with an eye towards completing the project before the end of 2020. And next slide, please. And that's really all I have for this evening. I wanted to thank the board for their time, and happy to answer any questions you have now. And we'll also have an opportunity to have a bit more of an in-depth conversation next month.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Anybody on the board have any questions? Lee, go ahead. I think you have a question.
Thank you, Peter. So I guess my question, that slide you put up just reminded me of sort of one of my pet peeves. The town temporary signs look horrible. The plastic frame that some of it is painted black. I mean, we're not setting a great example. I mean, is that something that is going to be worked on? I mean, that could be a whole separate thing that we could do ourselves, but that's the type of sign that I think we would not want to have in town in general.
Yeah, that is one of the things we absolutely looked at. The materials of the temporary signage, it's really half the battle. You see a lot of these, like, basically cardboard type signs with the two metal prongs stuck in the ground. We have, in the regulations, steered applicants towards higher quality materials. We also tightened up the time frames that these signs can be out there, all with an eye towards both creating a better aesthetic environment, as well as one that will hold up better in the elements, frankly. A lot of these cheap signs, you get a decent rainstorm, and if they haven't fallen over, then the signs are kind of falling apart. So that's absolutely something we looked at.
And the other question, how do we promote signs that look like the one at Park West Village and not allow signs like Bethany Village, which is just I don't know if you're familiar with those too. I mean, to me personally, the Park West sign was nice. It still has multiple different logos on there, but maybe it's a material. Bethany Village is like punched aluminum with 50 different little small logos everywhere. And it's like Park West has way more tenants, and yet they've got fewer logos, and I think that's part of it. I don't know. Just to me, like Bethany Village is like kind of the worst example of how to do that sort of multiple type sign. And how do we, you know.
Are you referencing the monument sign specifically, or the wall sign? Yeah,
the monument sign at Bethany Village, which is right at the intersection of Lake Grove, where it goes across to behind the food line on Davis Drive.
Yeah. So we did take a look at that, and there's a couple ways to address it. We have some enhanced monument signage requirements in the revised code that we'll bring forward. The other tool that the town has at its disposal, which is pretty significant, is any larger development, because those are both relatively large developments, that goes through the plan development process. You've got a lot of oversight on the aesthetics of the development, which doesn't just include the building. It includes the whole site, it includes the signage. So that's another tool where you can promote consistency between, building design and monument sign design. And the code also includes landscaping provisions to help soften some of those signs and not make it look like it's just something sticking in the ground. You want to kind of integrate it into the environment around as well. So that is something we looked at when I was out last. I know that Michelle drove me past both of those, and we had a good conversation about what's good and what's not so good.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was like, can you say, or you can only have 10? I mean, is that a content limitation that is no longer allowed? I mean, like, if you limit the number, again, because I think every single tenant of Bethany Village has their name on that sign, so it almost becomes lost in the background. Like, it's not even helpful to have all of them on there. But then again, I guess some tenants are winners and some are losers because some aren't on the sign, in other situations. I can understand both sides, but it's like,
it starts to read like a a mall directory at some point. We got to be right in front of it. Yeah, no, I hear you. You know, if the town wanted to limit the number of panels, it could. That's not a content-based regulation. That's a time, place, and manner regulation. But you hit the nail on the head. You may run into some market forces and some tenants that would look elsewhere if they can't get a panel. So there's a few strategies to do it that are still sensitive to market needs.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
No problem.
Member Sack, I think you had a question or comment.
Thank you, Chairman. The only thing I didn't see in the summary is anything, and maybe it's not applicable to Morrisville, but anything about billboard signs.
So the town's current billboard regulations, I don't believe we changed. So it wasn't flagged as an issue. Was there a specific concern that you had?
No.
Okay. Yeah, no, we zeroed in. Staff helped us kind of narrow our focus because it's like pulling a string. You can keep going. So billboards weren't flagged. Happy to talk about it, though, if there are feelings one way or the other on it.
Thank you.
I think then we'll probably look forward to a deeper discussion sometime towards the end of September. Unless anybody has any burning questions now. Okay. That's all we need to do, I think, Michelle?
And I just want to take the opportunity to thank our consultant, Attorney Jones, for just kind of providing a little bit of a refresh for everyone tonight before we hit you with a brand new code here soon. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you. All right. Do we need another break before we move to item 7, just A or B?
Yes, I think just a couple of minutes would be great.
So we'll take another unmuted break.
Thank you. So, Nick, you should have control requests coming your way.
He's not showing on Facebook.
And you should be able to scroll. Yep, there you go. Are you okay on your end, Nick?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am seeing a gray box here.
Yeah, we're seeing the full plan on our end, so I think as long as you're good, we're good.
Okay.
So I'll just give a quick intro statement and hand it over to you.
Sounds good.
All right.
Go ahead, Brad.
All right. Thank you. So good evening. I am very happy to present the first draft of the updated Morrisville Land Use Plan for you all tonight. This is the culmination of 2.5 years of work and policy guidance from Town Council, Planning and Zoning Board, various citizen advisory boards, key stakeholders, and of course the general public. A lot has changed in Morrisville since the original plan was adopted back in 2009. Being at the center of the triangle, which is a region of over 2.1 million people, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth over the past decade, and with that growth comes many challenges and opportunities. As such, Hauser Levine, the plan author, has done a commendable job in articulating the needs and desires of various voices across a wide spectrum of opinions. And like any land use plan, we fully expect not everyone will be happy with the recommendations therein, but I can guarantee you that Hauser Levine has done everything in their power to address the concerns of many different segments of our community and stitch together a plan that moves Morrisville in a positive direction. The plan does not shy away from the fact that growth is coming. It acknowledges it. It acknowledges market realities, but it also accounts for the very legitimate concerns that residents have about our growing community. We in the planning staff feel that this plan is something the town can be proud of. We feel that this is something the town can rely on for land use policy guidance over the next 10 to 20 years. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Nick Davis with Hauser Levine. But before I do that, I just ask that all Planning and Zoning Board members refrain from questions until after the presentation. We're going to record this for folks who can't make the live presentation. So thank you.
Okay. All right, well, Brad, thanks for that introduction. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for giving us an opportunity to present tonight. We have a pretty lengthy document to go through. We have an agenda. I want to go through the entire presentation. I'm going to give you kind of a high-level overview of what we've produced over the last couple of years, like Brad said. And then there's a couple of key areas that we want to focus in on and get your feedback. But we also want to make sure we allow enough time for the PZB to give us any questions or address any comments or concerns that they may have. So this is the makeup of the plan itself. It's broken up into 7 sections. So what I'll do is, like I said, kind of go through, give a high-level presentation, and then when we get to the end of this document, we can set aside some time and go through any specific comments. So the first chapter is the introduction. Pretty straightforward section. This is just talking about the plan, what the purpose of the plan is, why we do land use planning, specifically in North Carolina. But in this region, it being such a fast-growing community, I want to make sure that this plan is continuously updated. Make sure that you understand what that process looks like. Also, giving you a review of the overall planning process itself. So it's a 7-phase approach. We kicked off the project in phase 1. Phase 2 was an extensive outreach and community engagement process. Phase 3, we produced a thorough existing conditions analysis and a trends and influences summary memorandum. Phase 4, we produced the community vision and goals. Phase 5, we prepared detailed sub-area plans that we'll talk about later on in this presentation. Phase 6 is the community-wide plans and policies, which really focused in on the future land use map and then what other key considerations and recommendations needed to come out of that. And then the last component was really packaging this all together. We're in phase 7 now, as we prepare the plan document and
start kind of going through the review process and ultimately start ushering this into the adoption phase. But right now, it's a draft plan. It's out for public review. This is the first time that everybody's able to see everything in one comprehensive document, and we're looking forward to getting feedback. Chapter 2 is the community context. Just establishes where Morrisville is in the region, talking about some of the regional context, what some of its influences are, how development over the last 20 years has really impacted the way this community has developed, and what some of the challenges are that they face. Also defines the planning area. So the planning area is represented by the Morrisville municipal boundary. There's also an ETJ, which is what's shown in blue. So this is between the yellow and the blue, collectively, those are the areas that we have available to plan for. The blue is areas that need to or would need to be annexed to be a part of the Morrisville municipal boundary. Provide a brief overview of Morrisville's history. Certainly not a comprehensive history of Morrisville, but just enough to give someone context about, as we start looking into plan recommendations about future development or future trends. Where did this community come from? How did it get its start? We did a thorough review of past plans, studies, and reports, all of those that were relevant to the land use plan itself. So we looked at the 2007 Town Center Plan, the McCrimmon's Transit Small Area Plan in 2013, Connect Morrisville in 2018, and most recently the Comprehensive Plan in 2019, the Morrisville Affordable Housing Plan. And just making sure that any of the recommendations that were in those documents didn't get lost. They were incorporated not only into this brief summary, but more so into the recommendations inside the plan, be it through land use or some of the detailed sections that we'll talk about. Like I said, this is a very robust outreach and engagement process, and we'll continue to, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, we're going to continue to engage the community, engage the different boards and commissions, and make sure that we're getting feedback as we, like I said, start moving into that adoption phase. But to kick it off, we had conducted several in-person outreach events. There were complementary outreach events where, staff led a series of, table setups at any kind of event that was really accessible to groups. If there was people queuing in line, they were asking questions using Map.social, which is an online mapping tool, or, community surveys. We also had established a technical advisory committee, and that TAC group was someone that we used periodically throughout the planning process to review and provide feedback on plan components. There was a community workshop in May and in December of 2018. We conducted several stakeholder interviews. We provided DIY kits, so do-it-yourself workshop kits, which allowed groups in the community to conduct their own engagement. We gave them a process, a walkthrough, and those materials were delivered back to us in summer. We also did an extensive postcard send out in the summer and fall of 2018, just asking some very specific questions about what they'd like to see. There were drop-off boxes throughout the community. And like I had mentioned, there's several outreach events that were conducted, if it was at a festival or, really any kind of event that there was an opportunity to engage people. These pop-up tents were set up, maps were set out, and really a staff that was able to ask the specific questions. So Morrisville Fire and Rescue, Spring Fest, different kinds of events like that. And then there's just been additional workshops throughout this process. We've met with town council, we've met with the PZB a few times now. We've had at least 4 meetings, the TAC and several others. And then just outreach during the plan adoption. So this is still, evolving. We're looking to do some type of online public open house. We'll be meeting again with the PZB. We'll also be meeting with town council. And then we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail, but this was a form of outreach where it was publicized so people could see some options that we had done for the town council, or that we had done for the town center. And then again, just some of the online engagement. So a lot of that was traditional face-to-face. There was also a project website that was established. It's still up. It's how people are able to download the draft plan now. The best way to get to that is to use the town's website. There's a tab at the bottom that just says land use plan update. You can click on that just below the scroller on the home page. We had conducted several online surveys. There was a town employee survey, Map.social, which is an online engagement mapping tool. And then just a a comprehensive summary of all this outreach. And I won't go into this in detail, but this is stuff that everybody has seen up to this point. But all of this outreach, all this feedback was incorporated into the plan's recommendations. We had set up an existing land use plan based on our reconnaissance, GIS data that was available to us, and working with town staff. Also working with the current zoning map, which is sort of an ever changing zoning map in the community, just keeping that as up to date as possible. We also did a very thorough existing conditions that incorporated demographics, which included the population, age, race and ethnicity, employment, total employment, housing, and housing type. This is just a snapshot, but there was a very thorough breakdown that's in the existing conditions report and also in that trends and influences document. Chapter 3 establishes the vision and the goals. And the purpose of the vision and the goals is really to set a high-level, broad policy for what the community is trying to accomplish. So the vision itself describes that desired outcome to be achieved through the implementation of the plan, and then the goals describe the desired end situations. They're broad, they're long range. Some of them are very aspirational, but that is the point of these. Some of them may never even be fully realized. But each one of them, so of the 8 goals that we've provided, they're focusing on, providing, housing and improving some of the neighborhoods, or continuing to preserve the quality neighborhoods that you have. It's making sure that land use recommendations are fiscally responsible. We're talking about preserving and enhancing the diverse character of, some of the housing. We also talk about the innovative and healthy commercial, office, and industrial areas, making sure that you're strengthening the employment base and the tax base. Talk about establishing a vibrant mixed-use town center, which we'll talk about in more detail in the downtown section, and then strengthening the relationship between land use and transportation, continuing to support the public services, public facilities, community facilities, and then that last component is making sure that you're protecting and maintaining the environmental, environmental assets of the community. So these vision and goals, the vision and goals, we had talked about this with town council, back at just at the end of 2019. This is something that the town council themselves have seen. There's been a lot of back and forth working with staff on this, the fine tuning, and then once these were established, this is how the land use plan and then ultimately the recommendations within the land use plan were built from. So we're trying to achieve both this vision and this goal, or these goals. All right, so chapter 4 is the land use plan, which is going to include both the land use map and the land use designations. So in establishing the land use map, we use that to guide these 13 distinct land use designations, each of them providing, what are the preferred uses, density, the character of development, using real examples found in the North Carolina regions. We're not drawing from across the country. It's very specific to the type of development that you're seeing in this area. And we're really trying to drive home the implications of, what should the appearance, the character, the form, the function of the community be, and what's that relationship between these different uses. So these are the 13 land use designations. I'm not going to deep dive into these very specifically. If we want to come back to this section in the Q&A, I think that would be the easiest way to go through this sort of a page by page or panel by panel. One of the things to also keep in mind is, as part of this study and sort of separate, we had produced a fiscal impact model, and that is a tool that is given to staff, and they're going to be able to use that to assess in the future what the impact of recommended land uses would be using that model, based on current trends, based on current numbers, and that's something that is a tool that'll, better guide future development and long-term application of the land use plan. So that's a great tool that's not necessarily in this document, but it's a tool that will be able to use as new developments are proposed. So the future land use plan, we conducted, I'm going to jump to this. We've conducted a couple of meetings over different iterations of the land use plan. We met with that technical advisory committee and also the PZB back in December of 2019. And then based on feedback that we received from the technical advisory committee and from PZB, on January 14th, we met with the town council to present to them a revised version of that land use plan. And we've broken this section down. For those that you might remember, we broke it down into quadrants and tried to really zero in on what we were trying to accomplish. In each one of these, I think it was like 6 or 8 quadrants. But the 13 designations are low-density residential, medium-density residential, and high-density residential. That's a consolidation of some of the older designations that were in the previous plan. But then you still have the neighborhood activity center, business activity center, and the regional activity center. And we provide options for commercial. One thing that is a little bit different with this land use plan than the previous one is we do provide uses on this map as opposed to breaking out what is in the TOD East, the McCrimmon's Extension, the Town Center sub-areas. Now later on when we get into the sub-areas, those are even given more detail specifically about what those land use programs should be, site data tables that break down what types of buildings and mixes of uses are appropriate. But this at least gives you a high level of, this is the town center, these are the uses that are appropriate there. This is what we like to see in the business activity center, which makes up a large part of the McCrimmon's Extension, and the TOD East is a large portion of that is transit-oriented development. So like I said, I'm just going to hit some of the high levels for the low-density residential. So this includes neighborhoods of single-family detached, typically 4.5 dwelling units per acre or less. Primarily, the preferred use here is single-family detached. Some of the key considerations are just making sure that continue the allowance of accessory dwelling units that provide additional housing options. That's something that we're seeing not just in North Carolina, but across the country. That's a really important planning issue right now. Making sure that we're diversifying the affordable housing types, ensure that residential areas accommodate manufactured homes to assist with the affordability and comply with state statutes. And then one of the things too is capitalizing on design flexibilities. So these are larger lots, so just making sure that you can incentivize the integration of preserving existing trees into the home's landscape, and then taking into consideration the additions to historic homes. Medium density residential. So in this land use designation, medium density includes neighborhoods of single family attached. So this can typically be between 4.5 to 7.5 dwelling units per acre. So these are a little bit smaller than that low density residential. The preferred uses here are single family detached and single family attached. So we're showing two different options. There's single family detached, which is a traditional residential component, but then you're starting to see things like a duplex or a townhome in this area. Key considerations, avoid building new neighborhoods as isolated pockets, allow for the integration of small commercial village centers, so make sure that we're incorporating commercial where possible, encourage a diversity of garage orientations, and then amenitize stormwater features with benches and interpretive signage and trails and those types of improvements. High density residential, so that's anything that is a multifamily development, typically greater than 7.5 dwelling units per acre. So preferred uses here are small lot, single family detached homes, single family attached homes, multifamily residential, and then senior living / congregate care. Just making sure one of these key considerations here are ensuring that multifamily projects transition well into lower density surrounding neighborhoods. You encourage the integration of structured parking, make sure that that's wrapped with multifamily units. Just you want to minimize the visual impacts or the visual disturbances that surface parking lots can sometimes incur. And then encourage the inclusion of workforce and affordable housing, promote the use of rooftop decks. So, really just making sure that these aren't these vast blank walls, that you have some articulation in these buildings, those types of things, and then also just, providing some of the amenities that people do expect. So the NAC, the Neighborhood Activity Center, a wide variety of uses are appropriate here. So commercial, retail service, restaurants, entertainment, office, single-family attached, multifamily, mixed-use development, parks and open space, institutional, civic. So this has a lot of different uses to balance. So there's several key considerations that need to, be considered as you're starting to evaluate the types of developments that are appropriate in these land use areas. So reducing that visual impact, again, of large parking areas, making sure that the long facades of commercial strip buildings incorporate design features, those bump outs and the breakups of structure, promote the use of vertical gardens and decorative fencing, consider the use of smaller scale lighting and fixtures, and then continue to bury utility lines underground where practicable, I guess. The Business Activity Center. So this is that area that's over by the McCrimmon's area that we had identified, and then it's throughout the community as well. The commercial retail services are preferred uses, restaurants, cultural, lodging and hospitality, office, R&D and life sciences, multifamily residential, mixed-use development, institutional civic. And then some of the key considerations are continuing to include shared parking, ensure that transit infrastructure is well integrated into employment nodes, allow for flexibility in required parking if the uses are within close range of transit stops, considering offering incentives for the use of structured parking, utilize the McCrimmon Extension Sub-Area Plan for guidance, so that's calling on that sub-area plan that we're going to talk about here soon, and then continue the inclusion of life science uses and certain design characteristics if certain design characteristics can be met. A lot of this orienting the building, making sure that it functions compatibly with those larger windows. They're sighted, that it's more visible, it's a more attractive building, not just a blank wall. The Regional Activity Center, preferred uses here are office, institutional and civic, commercial, retail and service, restaurants, entertainment and cultural, lodging and hospitality, multifamily, and mixed-use development. You know, and again, a larger area. This makes up or provides, you know, the improved access to jobs, compatible mix of uses, and access to a variety of transportation options. So recent trends in online retail really does warrant a new approach to that in-person shopping. So we're just making sure that you know, people that do seek to visit these places, they're looking for an experience. They're not necessarily looking for just a kind of a one-stop shop. You know, allow for the integration of prominent visual landmarks like sculptures, ornamental structures, you know, especially around corners and entryways to enhance Morrisville's image and identity. Encourage large sidewalks that can be, or that can accommodate outdoor dining and seating. Encourage infill development of underutilized parking lots. This is something that we're seeing, you know, where some of that outlot development is a lot more creative than what would have traditionally been outlot development in the past. You know, requiring landscaping, requiring circulation to be a more attractive system, not just these expansive parking areas. Consider design elements that reduce the scale of retaining walls, such as vegetation, stone, and terracing. And then multimodal transportation connections are something that should be considered in this area. General commercial includes preferred uses such as commercial and retail service, restaurants, entertainment and cultural, lodging and hospitality, office, multifamily residential, mixed-use development, institutional and civic. Some of the examples that we show here, just showing a better example of not that traditional inline development, but something that has a much nicer character, a better style, better articulation to the buildings. These are typically going to be situated at the gateways into Morrisville. You want to provide ample pedestrian connectivity between the lodging and the retail and the service uses. As many visitors in Morrisville arrive at the RDU without a vehicle, I can attest to that. Continue to discourage buildings from orienting and having large blank walls towards the primary street. So you just want to make sure you have a very attractive structure as you're maintaining that visual corridor. Continue to place buildings and entrances close to the street with ground floor windows, articulated facades, just making a more attractive streetscape and walking area. And then parking between the building and the primary street should be minimized, with parking largely to the side or to the rear of the buildings. The town center, we can talk about this a little bit more in detail later, but just a vibrant mix of uses in Morrisville's you know, to be built out town center area. This is something where I think balancing the mixed use component of vertical mixed use, so, you know, commercial or even office components on the ground floor with residential and office components above, and then just really establishing a streetscape that people want to walk. So you're gonna park in a single location and be able to experience this town center and all the different uses that it can provide. Preferred uses include that commercial, retail and service, restaurants, entertainment, office. This will have some single-family attached, multifamily, mixed-use development, which would include many of these uses in one structure. Parks and open space, institutional and civic. We can come back to this, but this is something that we talk about in a little bit more detail in the town center sub-area as well. Office uses, again, this is a very significant use to the town of Morrisville. You know, the office parks, the corporate headquarters, research and development companies, emerging technology facilities, lodging and hospitality, R&D and life sciences, just making sure that all of these uses are permitted and encouraged in the office land use designation, just providing that broad spectrum of local and regional employment. You want to encourage diverse architecture styles. I think that's something that this graphic or this page shows really well. Is there's a wide variety of what these types of uses can look like, and many of them can still be attractive and really exciting spaces. Encourage the development of spaces geared towards small businesses, entrepreneurship, creative class such as co-working offices and incubators, multimodal transportation connections similar to the RAC, just making sure that those connections are made for these major employment hubs. The use of structured and shared parking is something that's encouraged. It'll help minimize the amount of impervious surface, that large expanse of asphalt and or concrete. And then just promoting some of the office modernization where appropriate to retrofit offices and amenities, make them more desirable, make them places that people want to establish their businesses in. Industrial. So industrial also makes up a significant tax base in Morrisville, and it's something that you want to continue to strengthen over time. I think just knowing what the location and some of the visibility challenges, making sure that they're compatible with the other uses that we're recommending, is still a desired use for the community. Heavy industrial operations such as manufacturing, there are special considerations for that. Light industrial operations, distribution, wholesale, warehousing, research facilities, flex spaces, business and industrial parks, telecommunication, compatible commercial and retail services, and then also that R&D, life sciences component. And then just similar to what we talked about in the office, the way that these businesses, especially the company's offices, are oriented towards the street. Those are the primary things that you can see from major corridors. Warehouse, manufacturing, and repair uses without large office components should be located along less visible collector roads. Coordinate with the industrial businesses to address changing needs. With proper landscape buffers in mind, ensure nearby retail and restaurants are well connected to the industrial uses. And then ensure that R&D and life science uses orient offices and other functions compatible with large windows towards the front of the site, and the lab or production space towards the less visible areas. And then heavy industrial uses and industrial uses with significant outdoor storage should be located along less visible collector roads. Institutional makes up your government buildings and offices, emergency response facilities, hospitals, utilities, community facilities, including senior centers, schools and higher education facilities, and then places of worship. Again, just making sure that these civic and institutional uses are the focal points. They're both visually and functionally important to the town. Often a lot of times these buildings are seen as a landmark or a very significant component of what defines the character. Working with religious organizations to help coordinate their respective expansion plans and ensure impacts to surrounding uses are mitigated. Similar to some of the other sections or other uses that we talked about, that multimodal transportation connection should provide a link to the surrounding uses, just giving people access to these institutional uses, and then coordinate with Wake County Public School System to ensure a high quality of educational services for Morrisville students. Should include considering potential locations for new schools, explore innovative alternatives such as adaptive reuse, something that we talk about a little bit more detail later on in the plan. Also, something else we talked about a little bit more in detail is the transit-oriented development. This includes like urban townhomes, which are much more denser townhomes than a more traditional attached single-family, multifamily residential. There will be some commercial, retail, and service components, restaurants, cultural, institutional, and civic, and then overall mixed-use development, which can be primarily would be a vertical mixed use. So again, commercial on the ground floor, residential, office components on the upper floors. And just making sure that we're allowing for an appropriate mix of uses to create an active district, oriented to plan and existing public transit options. We want to work with property owners and agencies to prepare potential TOD sites for long-term redevelopment. A lot of this could have to do with either the removal of hazardous materials, parcel assemblage. There's a lot of different considerations that need to be worked through as you start to evaluate where a TOD site might ultimately be built. Transit-oriented development should consist of shorter blocks, connected street grids. We have a good example of what this should look like in the TOD East, and then require prominent and active green space or plaza. So to offset this denser mix of uses, make sure that there's some spaces where people feel comfortable to, walk through and congregate, those types of things. And then the last land use designation is the parks, greenways, and open space. The parks, greenways, and open space consist of those outdoor green spaces, rec areas, recreational areas, environmental features and amenities. So we're talking about parks and open space, greenways, natural resource protection and conservation areas, stormwater facilities. This is something that we did here throughout the process, just making sure that these kinds of amenities or these types of uses continue to be considered as new development occurs. So just guiding the development and the maintenance, preservation, and programming of parks, greenways, and open space in accordance with the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Master Plan, as well as the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. Strictly preserve environmental assets within these areas, including protection of mature stands of trees, wildlife habitats and corridors, water recharge areas, etc. And then provide connections between parks and greenways and open space to adjacent residential uses. Could be residential, could be commercial, could be office uses, but whatever we can do to encourage that recreation or that access to these recreational areas really is an amenity for those businesses, those residential or neighborhoods, as well as the town itself. And then work with property owners and development community to identify preferred areas that may be suitable for future public and private parks or green space. All right, now, so I know that was a lot to throw out in terms of the land use designation, and like I said, we can come back to that if people have specific questions. So then, beyond the land use plan itself, that land use map, we provided some detailed land use considerations, kind of drilling down to specific topic areas. And I think similar to the land use designations, if there's something that specifically someone wants to come back to, let's put a pin in that. And what I'll do is just kind of give a brief overview of these 4 core sections. So there was a development and regulatory considerations, community facilities and infrastructure considerations, environmental features and open space considerations, and then image and identity considerations. So as part of the development and regulatory considerations, we looked at the land availability throughout the public engagement. That was something that we had heard. What land is available? We feel very landlocked. There's been a lot of development. We want to make sure that as this plan starts to unfold, are we identifying the areas that should be prioritized for future redevelopment? So this map identifies those undeveloped properties. And it's not to say that other areas can't redevelop, and in some cases they will, but this gives you some targeted areas to know that this is land that hasn't even been developed and is prime for redevelopment based on what we talked about in this land use plan. The RDU and airport overlay, this is one of those key issues that we want to come back to and make sure that we get the feedback from the PZB tonight. I would say that one of the key takeaways here is, back in, I want to say it's 1985, maybe it was 1988, when the town originally established that airport overlay district. They had broken it out into airport overlay AOA and AOB. And one of our recommendations that comes out of, finding different ways to provide the types of uses or set the stage for uses that we think are appropriate in these areas is to extend the airport overlay AOB, which is that orange, across Chapel Hill, so across NC 54. And there's a broader discussion or a larger discussion that we may want to have as it relates to what those appropriate uses are, and we talk about that in detail inside that McCrimmon's, and that's the largest area that addresses this, is that McCrimmon sub-area. But we can come back to this because there's some clarifications or just discussions that we know we want to have here. We address housing affordability. As I referenced, the town recently prepared a plan. Those considerations from the 2019 Affordable Housing Plan are going to be used to guide those policies, projects, and decision-making related to affordable housing and residential development in the future. This plan is consistent with those recommendations, and where it's possible, kind of ties it back to make sure that you're adhering to that study. Things that are key considerations: encourage and incentivize the development of missing middle housing. Definitely a big planning issue that the entire country is facing. I think Morrisville, not unlike many other of these communities, is trying to address it as it can through the land use plan and some of these recommendations. Your UDO, Unified Development Ordinance, there will certainly be, based on some of the recommendations inside this land use plan, amendments that are going to need to be considered. You're going to want to review and update the town's UDO and various development controls to align with the Morrisville land use plan. Often or always, land use planning should happen first. So we're doing this in the right order. You're going to prepare this land use plan. We're going to walk you through the process. And then, once everybody's on the same page what we're trying to accomplish, that's when it's the right time to amend your UDO to make sure that you're compliant with your land use plan. And then you just want to continue to review and update the town zoning map in accordance with the land use plan. And as future plans and projects come online, that's just something that you're going to want to keep, this plan current and keep your zoning code current. And then regularly review the UDO to ensure that it is consistent with the town's vision for development. And then closely review development applications and proposed rezonings with the land use plan recommendations in mind. This should be a tool that you as a PZB are using to evaluate whether or not someone's coming into alignment with what the overall community's goals and what the vision was trying to state. Is this what we're trying to accomplish in Morrisville? Some key design principles. These are just some really best practices about how we should be doing land use. So, the preferred, a well-connected development with diverse mix of uses, that upper image. Not preferred is the, classic corridor development, big box, inline, setback from the road, not attractive at all. Site design and parking, just talking about the preferred, where buildings should be located, how parking should be in the rear. A good example, the preferred option on top, where parking is integrated in the center of all these different uses that are both outlot. You do have that big box. You do have some smaller developments to the east and the west, but the parking is well hidden, still accessible. There's shared access to them, but it's not the predominant thing that you see from the corridor. Street connectivity. Hopefully we all agree that the green map is the ideal map for how roads should be connected to one another. So just making sure that development with diverse mix of uses and housing types are well connected, so people can not just drive but also walk, bike, move through these different neighborhoods and districts a little bit more fluidly than maybe that graphic on the bottom that's poorly connected, the cul-de-sacs, those types of things. Looking at setbacks, preferred setbacks closer to the road, make sure that there's an orientation of the building, through doors and windows. I know that I can walk into that building from this primary sidewalk, whereas this distant entrance, it's an uninviting kind of void between the sidewalk and the right-of-way to the entrance of the building. Preserving open space and landscaping, again, this is something that we heard throughout the process, that landscaping with the integration of existing tree stands and natural features as opposed to kind of the scrape of land and clearing of trees is obviously not ideal. We looked at screening and buffering. That's something that's very important between industrial uses and certainly between industrial and residential uses, but also industrial and commercial or office uses if they're not compatible. And then drive-throughs, there's a lot of bad ways to do a drive-through, and there's a few good ways to do a drive-through. That single narrow drive aisle orientation to the rear of the main building, just allowing that building to still be close to the street, but also allowing a circulation pattern to still use a drive-through and still get that benefit, but it doesn't completely encompass a building and pavement. We looked at utility areas just to the best that you can. There's ways to screen them. There's also ways to completely hide them from, if it's not through burying, just screening them with some of these nicer features, board on board or even some landscaping. And then just taking into consideration topography as sites are developed. You don't want these weird retaining walls that clearly break up the site next to it, to the best that you can. Try to work with the adjacent, or try to work with the grading and maybe to walk out to the front, walk out to the back, that type of thing. Community facilities and infrastructure. So in here we talk about the facilities and services and amenities. Many of these are current community facilities. So we broke them out into civic, educational, and then public park. And one of the main things here is just making sure that the town amenities and services, you want to monitor the town amenities and services to identify and plan for long-term expansion. So that's just something that over time, as the community continues to develop, that you're providing the services that you already do at the current level that you already do. That's something that people have come to expect in Morrisville. coordinating with partner service providers and community facilities to review long-term needs and plans, certainly something you're going to want to do. And then account for changing demographics and the increasing diversity of Morrisville's residents when considering new and expanded facilities, services, and amenities. Public education, and I think this might be something that was addressed even earlier on, making sure that you continue to work with Wake County Public School System to identify, maybe even potential locations in Morrisville for a school. I know this is something that working throughout the process, we were coordinating with WCPSS just to identify maybe potential locations. There are a couple, but they all come with their own challenges. I think for this to ultimately be realized where a site might be, you're going to need to continue to work with them. You have to proactively identify opportunities for where those types of uses are appropriate, and just know that over time there might be changes to maybe some of the decision making that's already had. But I mean, currently now that's proved to be a real challenge, and I think everybody on the PZB knows that, and everybody listening in. And then just shared infrastructure, knowing that with the town of Cary, you need to continue that or continue to plan for long-term infrastructure improvements. Same thing, transportation infrastructure. We didn't do so much of a deep dive on transportation, considering the town just adopted their transportation plan in 2019. But there are some relationships between that land use decision-making process and how transit stations or ultimately roadway impacts, those types of things that need to be considered. Those two ultimately do need to work hand in hand. So having those two documents working together and talking together is important. And then again, just addressing some of the key considerations for the roadway network, addressing some of the challenges with NC 54/Chapel Hill, providing opportunities or identifying opportunities for public transit. Although the town is not currently served by public transit, there are opportunities for it, and they've identified locations. So making sure that the development patterns around that could sustain or even bolster the need for that type of transit solution. And then just encouraging pedestrian mobility throughout the community is something that the town needs to continue to do. Again, just recognizing that you are almost directly in the center of the research triangle. You want to continue to regularly meet with the RTP leadership, making sure that planned projects and new developments are not negatively impacting Morrisville, and you're continuing to take advantage of this fantastic location that you're in, and just making sure that as NC DOT considers how to continue developing out some of their roadway systems, that some of the major traffic impacts that are existing along NC 54 and Davis Drive are key considerations that they're always having in the forethought of their mind. And then just Raleigh-Durham International Airport, a pretty significant driver to some of the successes in Morrisville. It's a great asset. And then just, again, maintaining that strong partnership with RDU, consider impacts of the airport operations as part of future development. And then the last component is the environmental features and open space considerations. So just evaluating some of the green space preservation policies, considering things like conservation design, so offsetting what is more conventional sprawl and considering that graphic to the right, to the bottom right, just showing it's the same mix of homes or the same mix of development, just on a much smaller footprint, allows for trails, community open space, you're able to preserve more woodland. And there's a lot of different aspects here that, again, I would say throughout the process, green space preservation and tree canopy preservation has been something that's been very important to people who voice their concerns. Public parks and open space, again, just identifying where the public parks are, where public open spaces are. Those are broken out into two different colors here on the map, and then just utilizing the Parks and Recreation Master Plan as that primary resource guide. So this isn't a Parks and Open Space Master Plan. There's a document in place that already identifies what some of the strategies are in the future. Just make sure that ties in with the land use recommendations that we provide. And then the private parks and open space, so those are broken up into three categories. You have private parks, the darker green, private open space, which is that lighter green. So those are open space is adjacent to, it's not programmable. It tends to be more open land or open areas, and then the golf course, or golf course to the south. and just continuing to work with neighborhoods and homeowner associations to encourage the development and maintenance of these private parks and open space is one of the key considerations. Like I said, we did a GIS analysis. This was provided by the National Land Cover Database, and then also updated by just kind of coordinating with town staff. We're able to identify what that tree canopy density is throughout Morrisville. And then I think this map and some of the key considerations in here are, as you start to move forward and you potentially are either updating or revising the UDO or starting to think about land use considerations, just make sure that this tree canopy graphics is something that is considered. Water bodies and floodplains were, especially with Lake Crabtree, something that we had considered. The connection with multi-use paths throughout the community, connecting smaller networks of multi-use paths that are already, or that already exist with proposed and planned multi-use paths down the line. And then just continuing to incorporate those into new developments, work with property owners to make these either easements or connections possible. And then image and identity considerations. So looking at the community character, and again, this isn't like a branding study or anything like that, but just knowing that the community has a character, something that people can identify, and you want to maintain and enhance that community character over time. Continue to think about what that visibility of Morrisville's character looks like, what the town should ensure for future development. You don't want to lose some of the higher standards that are already in place. You want to guide development to ensure industrial uses that generate significant impacts to their surroundings are located in areas with less visibility. So we talked about that in the land use section. And then just emphasize that quality development along high visibility thoroughfares. Historic preservation, just continue to prioritize the preservation of historic and cultural significant structures. Work with owners of property or potential historically significant structures and local preservation organizations to seek designation on state national registers. And then branding. So again, just continuing to build on the Morrisville brand and incorporating that throughout, gateways, wayfinding, anything that you can do to prominently announce that people are entering Morrisville, and then build that into also the land uses that are at these key intersections of these key interests into the community. Community diversity, so it's increasingly becoming more and more diverse, the community, so just taking that into consideration as the community continues to develop out over time. You want to strive to be considerate of those needs of those residents, review and consider how the town's UDO might allow housing alternatives that may appeal to the town's diverse population, and then town center and community spaces. So again, just providing a place for the town to have as a focal point where all your festivals or your events could be located. Encourage site design for future developments that will strive to help them as activity centers and destinations. Obviously, the picture above is a great example. I mean, you just want to see more spaces like this and accommodate more activities like this. And then the Superfund site, so just actively seek development of the Superfund site as a transit-oriented development. Okay. The sub-areas. Now we're going to come back to each one of these. So just high level, the sub-area plans are something that we've talked about really over the last year and a half. So there's 3 sub-areas, the TOD East, the McCrimmon's Extension, and the Town Center. So the first one that we're going to go through is the Town Center, the TOD East. And what we did is it's really broken up in a couple different sections, each one of these. There is a key descriptor, what we're trying to accomplish, what the goals are of the TOD East, and then a land use program. So now these are based off of 2 alternatives that we originally produced for each sub area, and we moved forward with a preferred one based on feedback from the Technical Advisory Committee, PDB, as well as Town Council. And so these land use programs are what guided then development programs. Now, this isn't meant to be the concept that's going to get built out. It's just to give you an idea of 1, scale, 2, the mix of uses that would be appropriate, how they should be oriented based on the design principles that we talked about earlier, how they're reflective of the uses that we're recommending, and then it starts to give you a general breakout based on the site data table on the right here about what the building footprints would be, the total square footage. We start talking about heights, so what the floor height should be, how many units. Again, this is all very conceptual, although it looks very detailed. We're trying to keep this general in nature. And what we want to do is then, using this graphic sort of as a guiding principle of what you're trying to accomplish, how buildings should be oriented, where public open space should occur, how people would be able to connect into those, how someone could connect into Wake Technical Community College area or to the RTP campus. As you start to transition into some of the office uses to the northwest or the northeast, those office uses might be complementary to the mixed-use development that we show. So that darker blue upper story would all be office. There'd be commercial on the ground. I think you can see my mouse. I'll use the mouse here. So this would all be office space. You'd have some commercial on the ground floor. Would have some proximity to some of the sidewalks as people are walking through this area. Through here, though, this would be a mix of mixed-use buildings. So you'd have commercial on the ground floor with multifamily residential components above. And you can see here, we show, if you're able to accommodate parking with a parking deck, that would always be preferred. So try to avoid these vast parking lots, but where those parking lots are going to occur, you want to make sure that they're encompassed by the buildings, not as visible from the primary or collector roads. And like you can see, just see kind of these mix of uses allow for a much more walkable, dense, transit-oriented development. Here's my, for the McCrimmon extension, so same thing. We started with this land use program, so identifying uses such as multifamily, commercial and office, industrial and office, corporate office, office and multifamily, sports complex, and open space. So again, having worked through those two alternatives, several months back, we settled on or came to this is that preferred direction. So you can see, where the multifamily would occur. It's broken up by commercial and lodging and some office, corporate office components and the sports complex, and open space is also incorporated throughout this area. And then using this land use program as a guide, we created, again, a conceptual development program that could be appropriate based on, again, our design criteria for what commercial should do, how it should look based on those design principles, where they should be sited, where multifamily should be sited. And one of the things that you can see a little bit better on this graphic is just understanding the scale of this area. It's such a large area to be considering and planning for. So knowing that there's a lot of different phases and components of uses that need to be considered. So you might have multifamily. In some areas we have multifamily, or we have office coming along from McCrimmons Parkway. There's some commercial with parking in the back and a much larger commercial development to the east. As you come further south, we're showing this could be standalone multifamily. That would be right up against the parkway. So that's that vertical multifamily use. There's some other components that we show. Maybe it's a mixed use that could have commercial on the ground floor and multifamily above. So there's this types of discussions or feedback that we'd like to talk about with the PZB. We show open space options connecting to a much larger open space area to the east. It's the best that we can, preserving the tree canopy and enhancing other vegetation and open space opportunities throughout this area. And then again, just providing the mix of uses that we've been talking about over the last couple of years in this site plan. Oops, I think you jumped ahead. All right, and the last one is the town center, and this one's probably the most vetted in terms of the mix of uses and the density, the scales, and what was appropriate, because we really went through a deeper exercise in preparing that immersive 3D model that we did almost a year ago. So that land use program for the town center is mixed use, mixed residential, commercial, single-family neighborhood, institutional, public gathering space, open space. And again, I guess at the core of this, we're trying to create a town center in a community that really has never had that what is considered like a crown jewel in most communities. So doing this the right way has been very important. So I know working through the land use program with town council and the TAC and with staff to come to a development program that produced the amount of commercial and residential that we're looking for, also incorporating that open space You have institutional options that are building off of institutional options that already exist. So, here's town hall. Here's some of the other civic or town uses, some potential institutional or office spaces that would transition into the town center. And then as you're coming off the roundabout here, this would feel so different in terms of, other developments. It would have that pedestrian feel. So we provided some visualizations about what that could look like. So this is that overview graphic that just shows what the option 2. So again, we provided 2 options for what this could look like. Option 1 showed a much lower density, 1-2-story buildings, a lot of surface parking. This is a more appropriate town center concept that shows, using parking decks here and here to offset some of that parking demand, lane use demand, and starting to kind of build this up and providing a more, I would say, like traditional town center feel. And then we also provided some detailed visualizations and drop downs about that model that was created for this, kind of the story, about what it took to build this out, what it produced, all the reporting that comes out of this. To the square footage and the unit counts, we're able to clearly identify what the overall demand would be if you were to build this out. And then this is just that example of what the town center, and the key open space, the plaza space would look like, and how there might be some, commercial on the ground floor, residential above, and then showing what some of the night option, what it would look like at night, just that night feature. Then the last section is implementation. So there's one component of implementation that's not completed, but what this section talks about is, establishing the action plan. So using this to make those day-to-day decisions, the tool that your groups, the PZB, but also town staff, town council, everybody's going to be using this document to make a lot of their decisions related to land use. So just using it daily, evaluating the policies and regulations that may need to be amended to reflect this, working with partner agencies, encourage private sector investment, coordinate with new facilities and infrastructure, and integrate with capital investment programs. So a big part of the plan's recommendations is tying that into future improvements that will need to occur inside your CIP. I think we've said this a couple times throughout the document, but just develop and maintain partnerships. You're already doing that, but you got to continue to do that as you move forward. Working with Wake County, Town of Cary, the city and the county of Durham, RDU, the Wake County Public School System, all these different partners, and make sure that your land use recommendations and your land use policies reflect or are reflected in their policies and in their directions as they continue to plan on and inside their organizations. Continue to maintain your public communication. I feel like this is something staff does very, very well. There's always a constant public feedback loop out there about not just this document, but other plans. This document should be updated regularly. Some communities do it every 3 years, some do it every year. Typically, every 5 years, you would want to evaluate the plan's recommendations. Trends change, things change. Just want to make sure that you're reflective of that, and then just measuring your progress. And part of measuring that progress is going to be talked about in this implementation action matrix. One of the other things that you want to consider too are the potential funding sources. So a lot of these organizations or a lot of these funding sources, one of the first things they'll ask is what is said in your land use plan? What is said in your comprehensive plan? And if this is something that isn't well vetted through a community process, it's very difficult to seek those types of funds. So that's something that, using these different funding sources for economic development, employment, affordable housing, environmental sustainability, those are considerations that you'll want to use as you start to think about, promoting a type of development or really zeroing in on an area. And then the last component of this is the implementation action matrix. And what this will ultimately include is key actions. So we're going to take recommendations from the plan, which we've already started that when you see those key considerations, and flipping those into action. So this becomes like a checklist. I have an example on the next page, but you'll identify key actions. We'll talk about ease of implementation. Is it a project that requires a policy change? Is it a policy change with a large investment? Is it something that will require significant investment? It might take a lot of an effort to do. So we'll give you an ABC ranking on that. We'll give a time estimate. It's something that can be done in less than 2 years. It's going to take 2 to 5. It's something that might take more than 5 years. And again, this will just give you an ability to kind of prioritize. If it's an easy thing to do and it's only going to take, a year, that should be something we should probably pick off first, go for the low-hanging fruit. And then we'll also identify partners working with town staff to make sure that, as this document is trying to be implemented, various policies or recommendations, you're coordinating with the right partners or the right team members. And then you may want to consider establishing an implementation committee, just a group. I mean, a lot of times that's the PZB, or it might be a mix of different representatives from the community. But just making sure that basically this matrix that we'll build out once we have a kind of a sign off from the PZB, town staff, town council, and hear from the public about what they'd like to see. We'll ultimately build this out to reflect those specific action-oriented items that need to happen for this plan to be implemented. So this is just an example, placeholder text. Don't try to read it. So yeah, with that, again, I know I threw a lot at the group. It was 84 pages. Did it about as quickly as you can. So yeah, I think what we want to do is open it up. There are, like I said, there's some key things that we want to make sure that we address tonight, but I also want to make sure that we give the group an opportunity to ask us any and all of their questions. So yeah. So with that, I'm not sure, Brad, do I hand that back to you?
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
So, per the agenda, we were going to. Some feedback. Nick, your mic on?
Yeah, don't use that one.
Don't use that.
Take that one away from you.
So, in the agenda, sorry about that. We have 5 key policy areas that we're going to try to focus on first. They have a lot of ripple effects throughout the document, so we want to ensure that we get to those first and foremost to get your feedback. Those are the general future land use map and the land use categories associated with that, the sub areas, so the TOD East, the McCrimmon Extension sub area, and then the town center. And then lastly, we'll get to, in terms of those 5, the airport noise overlay and the amendments we're recommending in this plan to that. And then after we get through those 5, we'll open it up to general policies throughout the plan, anything else that we aren't covered in those 5 key policy areas. And so Nick's got the future land use map pulled up here. And he can, I don't know if you can put it on full screen, that might help folks see it at home. And so and Nick, I'll let Nick take over the Q&A here, but he's going to just kind of walk through big picture stuff with you if you need to again, but really just kind of take general feedback, general questions. So Nick, I'll turn it back to you. Can you hear me, Nick? You might be muted.
I am. As I say, I guess with that, are there any specific questions the PZB has? I mean, again, I think not just this map, but also the land use designations. If there's questions, we'd like to walk through them. But I know we talked about this land use map really in a couple of different meetings over the last year and a half. So hopefully this is a very familiar map to most of you.
So Brad, let me ask, you've done with your special recording, we can speak now?
Yeah, you are free to speak. Yeah, so we are officially done. Thank you for clarifying that.
So I'm actually going to kick off with a question to Nick. You just mentioned that we've seen this before. What's changed since the last time we saw this?
Boy, I mean, it would be, I can't even think of a major change that has occurred. There might have been some refinement inside of like TOD East and McCrimmon to better reflect what was happening in the land use programs. But I would say by and large, what we talked about was some of the regional activity center and what was happening up in this area, if it wanted to be office versus high density residential. But I think this is more of like it was a discussion showing what ultimately we're showing here now. I'm trying to look through and see. I think we did do some cleanup down here along Aviation Parkway. I don't know, Brad, can you think of any other ones that were?
So we had big change, all sorts of back and forth, sort of just deep thoughts about the overall land use plan. I mean, we In terms of everything outside of the sub area, there's a lot of talk about the sub areas, but things outside the sub areas, we didn't recall any significant changes, and we went back to the meeting recordings, and it was more considerations that we take into account moving forward with the land use map. So, we're here tonight to ask you, with those considerations taken, especially for the sub areas, what are some key things you want us to either look at again or reconsider or elaborate on? We're happy to do that, but no real significant changes from the last time you saw this map.
I think at the last time.
I mean, you can even see that, like March 6th, I think was the last time this was significantly changed.
Yeah.
And by significant, again, that it was inside the sub areas.
Right.
So we gave you some feedback, I think, back in March.
You did.
And I don't see that feedback has been changed.
Well, which feedback are you specifically
I hate to
referring
be specific, but on Holly Creek, for example.
Yeah, so Holly Creek, we got feedback from some of you about the willingness to whether or not we should go with medium density residential, to correct me if I'm wrong, or neighborhood activity center. There was some feedback, and Nick, feel free to step in if you want to elaborate on this as well. That area is changing dramatically. There's a lot of activity occurring, especially with Wegmans across the street. That the character of that area is no longer kind of rural, bucolic Morrisville. It's more of a high intensity area, and we definitely hear that. We understand that. And I don't want to speak for Nick, but from what I understand, House of Levine is also understood is that there is a large residential subdivision to the west of that Holly Creek Road area. And to better transition to that area, which is technically in the town of Cary, medium density residential seems more of an appropriate use for that piece of land. Now, along Davis Drive, I think House of Levine sees that as a busy corridor with a lot more activity. It's right across from Wegmans, as I mentioned earlier. So, the neighborhood activity center designation in their mind makes more sense in that location. But as you step further back from that high active road corridor, you get back into more of a quieter residential area. I should also point out that a medium density residential zoning equivalent, if you were to rezone this is, again, these are just future land use designations, but if you found a similar zoning district with our medium density residential, that allows for elementary and middle schools. So, Nick, I don't know if you want to say any more to that.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, I guess based on the discussion that was had when we last talked about this, to me, medium density makes sense here. Or I'm sorry, even low density. But when you start getting into a neighborhood activity center, it has no proximity to Davis Drive. It just seems it's too far removed from a primary road. And yeah, like Brad said, as it starts to transition into the development that's happening directly to the west, it just seems out of context and starting to take away from the neighborhood activity center that's already there and really could still use some infill development.
So my question was about this too. So if you're going to say that, I mean, I'll believe it if you drew the line in a more sensical way. To have a point of the lower density almost touching Davis Drive is not planning. That is just randomness. And I felt like there was a pretty good from people who, in general, were in favor of. I guess my question is, why are we worried too much about what Cary's doing? They don't worry about what we're doing. They're still trying to build like a 7 or 8 story building right near some houses. I can see what you're saying. If you want, certainly there's a good sort of something to be said about going, down in density as you go back, but at least draw the line somewhere that makes sense rather than just like this random point.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, so that line is based off of the parcel, right? So if we want to talk about...
There's a lot of parcels there, though, so you could draw the line at any other parcel. I mean, you're just drastically limiting this nice sort of large... I mean, Wegmans is a huge draw already. There's going to be this building on the corner here, this medical building. There's this 55 and over complex right across the street from there. I mean, there's a huge... I mean, you're just going to make a nice piecemeal, randomly rezoned chunk of single-story doctor's office or whatever else that's going to be in there just randomly. If we don't do this in some more thoughtful way, it's just going to be more randomness that I think the last 80 pages of the document said that we shouldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll comment for a second here. It's not random. If you look at an aerial, and again, I'll let
I'm
Nick
thinking
chime
it
in.
will be random.
Well, let me
As
finish. So it's not random in the sense that it's being plopped into this area with a bunch of high intensity activity. If you look to the west, just over the border, I know they're technically not Morrisville residents, but we still are respectful to other nearby uses, and so. Lower density. Now, it's not even really lower density. It's more of a medium density residential development to the west, directly west, that interfaces with this area. And so what Nick's trying to say is that as the intensity steps back from Davis Drive, which to your point is definitely an intense area, there is a stepping down of density. And also we should mention that we're getting input from many other advisory boards and members of the public, town council, and they have many different opinions about this, not just this one, channel of feedback. So it's something that House Levine certainly spent a lot of time thinking about, but at the end of the day, weighing all the feedback, not just from the Planning and Zoning Board, they felt that this was the most appropriate use designation.
I'd like to make 2 points. We
So
talk about
even
stuff to the
with
west.
this point.
But to the north, you've got a Sheetz gas station plan. That's not exactly residential. And the other feeling I have, which is less personal, but speaking for the group, we had some feedback on your March version, and apparently nothing changed. So that's kind of a downer.
Well, but again, we are open to talking specifics about which feedback you feel like was not included. I mean, we're getting multiple avenues of feedback from multiple different sources. I mean, we try to strike a balance between those. I know the Holly Creek situation is a very sensitive issue. I understand that. Nick understands that. There's many, many different factors and nuances to that particular area of town. And, right now, House Levine's feeling like it's in terms of just stepping down intensity is what they're hearing from folks is the right way to go. Now, happy to discuss that further if you'd like, but.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of this meeting.
Yeah.
So we should.
Yeah, I guess can I chime in here? It's not random. The general commercial distinction that we're providing there is really based off the parcel configuration that's there. If we want to start breaking up parcels, that's a different discussion that we could have. And we did talk about this in the last meeting. Yeah, to Brad's point, I guess I disagree that this wants to be a neighborhood activity center. That doesn't seem to be consistent with what's happening in this area, what's happening in other areas. You're starting to intensify at an intersection. This is starting to get way too removed from the intersection, which is the intent of a neighborhood activity center. It's starting to become a regional activity center at scale. And that's not the goal. And I'm trying to say this the right way. It's not necessarily to be a good neighbor to Cary. It's also being a good neighbor to whatever use goes into here. If a commercial use ends up that far away from Carpenter Road, Morrisville, Carpenter, or Davis, it's not going to succeed. And that's what we're trying to avoid. There might be some residential components, but it's going to be wedged in deep. So I think that's why we were trying to strike a balance of medium density residential as you start to transition away from this intersection with corridor commercial adjacent to Davis.
I guess because I'm looking, it's not connected. Is there going to be any connection to this to any of the roads within the Savan development?
I don't know that they.
It's basically going to be a pocket now of medium density residential with no other access that is fronted by commercial.
Yeah, it's not connected with a roadway. It's spatially adjacent, though, I think. Is that what you're asking?
Right. So how is that helpful to the people that are going to live in this pocket of, I don't know, you're going to be surrounded by the gas station on one side, whatever other sort of development goes around there. You're going to have commercial in the front. We've already approved this medical office on the other side of Holly Creek. We've rezoned the other side now to business. And you're going to have this drive past all these offices and whatever else to medium density houses, like basically Savannah, where I live. I mean, maybe you could, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's a really good land use either.
One thing I'll point out too, and again, Nick can jump in, is one major theme of this future land use map is to shift a lot of, so one of the big pieces of feedback we got from people, especially in existing family neighborhoods, was that they're kind of tired of higher density development encroaching on their single family neighborhoods. And so we heard that loud and clear. We heard that multiple times at many different events and input sessions. And so what we tried to do is steer higher density development towards the east, where they're receiving major transportation improvements, major investments in transit, where there's employment nodes that are desperate for housing close by, and also not next to any existing single-family neighborhoods. And so we are trying to be responsive to those folks who don't want higher density residential near their single-family neighborhoods and in the western side of town. Do the market forces call for it? Absolutely. You could build all sorts of multifamily or higher intensity commercial, mixed use or whatever in that area. That's certainly not the issue. It's more trying to respect the wishes of the residents and the feedback that we received at these engagement events.
Chairman Pritchard, if I could maybe suggest, the goal tonight is to provide an overview of the plan to the PZB, answer any questions you may have, and ultimately get the board's feedback. We're going to be getting feedback from the Planning and Zoning Board, feedback from the community, sharing all of that with Town Council. Mm-hmm. So if we're hitting these kind of key issues where there's a lot of dialogue, I might suggest taking a straw poll so that we could accurately relay your recommendations and feedback to the Town Council of what a majority of the Planning and Zoning Board feels on some of these issues as we get to the key ones. Just a suggestion.
I think we did that last time. We did that in March. And here we are back again. So I don't want to monopolize this evening on that.
But, we will certainly, if there is a general consensus from PZB, we will come back when we present this to council and let them know that the majority of PZB would prefer this area to be something else. I mean, we're happy to do that.
One of the reasons that, the residents of Holly Creek were suggesting that you do NAC was so that you would have a coordinated development, not bits and pieces. And that's a very strong factor, I think.
Yeah, and I think House Levine thinks you can still do a coordinated, non-piecemeal, comprehensive development, but it would just step down in intensity from Davis Drive.
Okay.
Right.
I think Tim Toterai would like to speak. Go ahead, Tim.
Hey, Nick, a question for you. In passing, you mentioned that there were only 2 viable sites for schools and that both were problematic. Could you point out kind of where those fit in the map? And just a quick overview of those.
Sure. So, I can go, Nick. So,
yeah, go ahead.
So I'll start. Nick can jump in. So I think you're talking about the ones that we pitched to Wake County Public Schools. Is that correct?
And just the ones that were mentioned tonight. That I don't know, was pitched to the.
You said
schools,
the two schools
that were viable for schools. Yeah, I guess there were 2 sites, the only 2 sites in Morrisville that were viable for a public school.
So we've
as I understand.
Yeah, so there's sites that are viable west of NC 54 and then east of 54. And so basically what we have from Wake County Public Schools is general site desirability or site specifications that they're looking for. And if we're going to go strictly by what they provide us, so they need, let's just say for a high school, they need like 70 to 80 acres for a high school. And it's no secret that there's almost nowhere left in town other than the McCrimmon Extension area or areas near there that could support a facility that's, 70 to 80 acres. So if you're talking about those kind of facilities, yeah, there's only a finite amount of spaces left for that. As you go down to middle school and elementary school, they need a lot less acreage. We worked with Betty Parker at Wake County Public Schools. We've been in close communication with her. She is essentially in charge of recommending school sites in Morrisville. And so we've been in constant communication with Betty to try to see if there's anything we can do on the town side to make as many sites available as possible. Make sites that may have been overlooked in the past, more appetizing for them. And she's been very receptive. She understands that there's a tremendous desire for locating more school facilities here. They're just having trouble with our current situation, finding a site that's suitable to their standard specifications. The airport noise overlay is something that's weighs heavy on them. They know that there's large chunks of land east of 54, but they are not prepared to site a school anywhere near there so long as RDU is not supportive of that use. Even if the airport noise overlay, and I'll just be clear, is amended and a school could potentially be sited there, Betty Parker would still have reservations recommending a school site there. But she does acknowledge, and she has acknowledged to us that that could change in the future. They have a 7-year CIP. Wade Martin, who also works for Wake County Public Schools, was here Tuesday night for a special use permit. He made it clear that once you get into the 5th, 6th, and 7th year of a 7-year CIP, those can be sort of flexible, and that they have schools that they intend to build, but they don't have sites yet. So nothing's concrete, but we have to go with what Betty Parker says. And
I appreciate that. I guess I thought I heard in the presentation that there were actually 2 sites that were viable today. Is that correct?
More like an evaluation was done of sizes, and there's places that could have accommodated it, but I think more so what we talk about in the plan is if there's a viable solution in the future, there's other solutions. You might do like adaptive reuse. There could be options for parcel assemblage. So it's not as simple as just saying like there's the school site, and that's something that working with Wake County public school systems that we'd worked through this in a couple of different conversations. And if it was easy as just saying there's the site, they would do that. And I think the other areas that we're providing an opportunity for in the future, there could potentially be a school site. Like Brad just said, right now, I guess where they stand, they don't think that's the right site, but that could change. And that's why the first thing that this plan needs to do is at least let that be a use that could potentially go in these areas. So that's sort of our first step.
Yeah, we intentionally didn't show a school in the conceptual imagery. We don't want to presume to know the exact site that a school would want, or Wake County would want to build. We kind of leave that to them. But we are, in terms of allowable uses in the text, we are definitely recommending that schools could be built in certain areas that they haven't looked at before. So.
Yeah, I guess the feedback for me is it's a little bit concerning when we look at 3 areas that are being developed, or the TOD, McCrimmon Extension, Town Center, and there's no conceptualization for a school. The only one that has an institutional mention is the Town Center, and that clearly has a purpose for other things. So I think when this is a huge need for the community, it doesn't seem that there is a viable way to address it with the available space. It's kind of counting on repurposing of some facilities, and that to me is a miss on the plan.
Okay.
I'm going to move on to ask Sanjay. I think Sanjay wanted to speak.
My question is in the similar lines as what Jane was asking, right? And if you look at the plan right now, forget about what the current needs are, right? If we look at this current plan, what are the potential places that schools can go on, right? We kind of talked about McCrimmon Extension being the place. Perhaps that's an area. Whether they like it or not is another story. What's the other area from a land use point of view that they can go in? At about 70. If you said 70 acres is what they are looking for, what is another area that comes close to that?
Yeah, I mean, so we if you're talking about beside the McCrimmon Extension area, there's really only a couple of spots left that could cite some sort of educational facility. I mean, and we've brought those two specific sites to Wake County Public Schools' attention. They may be interested in one. Just looking at it kind of from a 30,000-foot perspective, they haven't done any detailed site analysis quite yet. But there is some land west of 54 that could potentially site a school, but again, they are not committed 100% to building a new.
I'm not worried about what they're committed. In the last time when they came to the board, they did not even have a plan for. They couldn't even tell me what was the capacity or what was the expected number of students next year. So I'm not worried about whether they have a plan or they don't have a plan. I'm just trying to figure out, as we are doing the planning for land use, what are the potential places schools can go in, right? About the size of 70 acres is what you said was for high school, right? So
70 for high school.
Yeah, or say roughly 70, right? So what are the pockets where those that a school could be accommodated, whether they want it or not is second, right? So clearly the McCrimmon Park area, McCrimmon Extension area, the one that is out there is A area, right? The Olive Creek area was something comes close to 50 acres, 60 acres maybe, right? Yeah. What is another pocket in here where a school could potentially go? Maybe the TOD area?
So TOD is a former Superfund site, so that they've expressed pretty clearly they're not interested anywhere near the TOD. But
I'm not. Yeah. No, I'm not asking that. I'm just asking from a 70 acreage point of view. Tell me, on our map, what are the potential areas a school could be accommodated? Plus minus a few acres here and there, right?
Yeah. Okay. But so like TOD East is 71 acres. So it wouldn't meet the criteria for a high school if you did the entire TOD East. So I mean I understand the question, and I guess to reiterate back, there isn't a 75-acre pocket that exists in Morrisville that is easily developable for a school. And I think working with the Wake County School, I mean they've recognized this. They've looked at other options west of 54, and again, there's not like a clear, there's the pocket that we can develop easily. So
one thing that Nick mentioned earlier in the plan walkthrough is that we are, though, encouraging Wake County to maybe be a little more flexible with their site standards. Are there alternative ways that we could cite educational facilities in Morrisville that are different from the standard protocol of what they typically do? I mean, if you've ever seen the new school, I mean, they're massive facilities that are spread out kind of horizontally. Is there a vertical way we could go? Is there adaptive reuse options, or are there regulatory issues that we have that could be overcome on our end that would help them out in terms of citing a school more? So I mean, there's all sorts of things we could explore.
Right, and that's precisely where I was going. Right? That's precisely where I was going. I wasn't really trying to say that, yes, today they have a 75 acreage issue. We don't have 75 acres anywhere. So provided they compromise somewhere and we can get to an area that could be used, or, charter schools don't necessarily have the same, 75 acreage limitage. So if they can't come in here with a public school because they are inflexible, then what are the other areas that we can, as a community, allow, right? Or have areas to support a school. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for trying to meet that, 75 acreage limit. I'm just trying to figure out what are the pockets left that are close enough. May not be perfect, but close enough.
I think Michelle would like to speak. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Chairman. We obviously know that schools are a high priority. It comes up daily in our conversations with citizens, with all of you, with town council. And we're in regular communication with the school district. It is highly unusual in a land use plan to designate a site for a school. If it's not publicly owned land in particular, that has other implications. But we do work behind the scenes. I know we have our new Public Educational Advisory Committee that was formed for the purpose of focusing on school issues, constantly working to see what property might be available, constantly communicating with the school district, sending information to them about potential sites. I think we all know it's a challenge because what we have left undeveloped doesn't easily meet their acreage criteria, let alone those parcels are left for a reason. They're the ones that are left undeveloped because they have an odd shape. They have, you guys were talking about TOD, which is a Superfund site. They have floodplain, riparian buffers, topography issues. So it's not just finding a site that meets the acreage or close to the acreage. What is left for a reason. And I think everyone acknowledges that, you know, if we're going to cite a school, there is going to need to be some creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. And so even though you're not seeing a school site, you know, in the land use plan, that definitely doesn't mean that it isn't a high priority and what we're, you know, something that we're constantly thinking about, constantly in communication with the school district about. It's just if you're going to color something on a map and it's privately owned property, I'd be careful about that.
Right. And Michelle, I'm not asking for something to be colored as a school or anything of that. What I'm really trying to get to is, let's just say, if there is a pocket that if an area needs to be designated where a school could go in, what kind of zoning will go in? Let's say, will medium density residential classification for a given area, a high school can go in?
So if a school has a location, it can typically go in many of these land use designations. And when you're talking about zoning, that's something else. Like those are the types of things. Like if the right site came online, and we talk about this, if the town can continue to work with the school district and the right site for whatever reason were to come online and they could redevelop or repurpose an existing location, that would be something the town would do. And I think you would
absolutely
make a long effort.
Yeah, you're not going to vote against it, Sanjay.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is I can't think of I guess I'm not really sure what you're trying to get at, to be honest. I mean, I understand the issue here. It's a big issue, but I'm not.
You know what? Yeah, I'm just trying. I'm trying to figure out what land use category is a good fit for a school, and
I think you're saying it doesn't matter.
That's not the intent of
I'm going to jump in here as the usually quiet chairman and say that Chris would like to say something. Hold on, please.
Oh, it wasn't anything important. I just wanted to make sure we stayed on task. So I think you've captured schools were important to the board.
Yep.
Do you have anything else on the list? Because we're not going to solve it today. And so I know there were 4 or 5 points you wanted to specifically address and then open for questions. So you've captured schools, correct?
Yes, correct. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So
one other question that is not necessarily related to the school work, right? You earlier talked about conservation development versus the current methodology of wiping all the trees down and doing development. So is that something we would put in a UDO, or how would we integrate with doing conservation development activities?
I think we're just going to let Brad go ahead. Maybe
all I heard was dog barking. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
So let Brad go through the 4 or 5 things he wanted to get from us tonight.
Yeah, so I guess we'll for now, I mean, it sounds like there's one area specifically that you all would rather see change, which is fine, and we can certainly convey that, and that was the Holly Creek area. If you are all generally okay with we don't recall any significant consternation about the other areas. There was some debate at the last PZB meeting about whether certain areas should be medium density or high density. I don't think we got clear direction on which versus which, and specifically around Church Street. So we left it as is. Council kind of had a similar conversation about it. But yeah, unless there's another major snag like Holly Creek, let me know. But we can move on to our sub areas if that works.
Well, I think there was one other area in the town center just to the east of 54.
Yes. So we actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So the Clements, the reason hasn't changed is the Clements Drive folks. We spoke with their representative. They are happy with the current land use designation, low density residential, and don't want to see it changed. So I think it was Mac Baker, I believe, who I spoke with. And so he went around, asked folks what they thought, did they have plans to retire and move away? And so they would prefer us to keep it the way it is, understanding that area is changing.
Okay. And was that the same, or was that a different area where there was residential right up against institutional?
Yeah, so this is an interesting area where we also have input from the Hindu Society of North Carolina. They have expansion plans. Right. We've tried to accommodate, and we've worked actually really closely with them. We've tried to accommodate their conceptual expansion plans, but also respect the residential nature, character behind them. I think they would like, from what I understand from them, they would like more institutional space shown on this map. We've told them that we're trying to balance feedback from the neighborhood behind them and show it as residential still. I expect them to formally request that we add more institutional space back there, just something to give you a heads up on. But since based on the input we received, we've kind of left the map as is in that area.
All right. I think that was the only ones that I remember. So let's move on to your sub areas.
Sure. So Nick, if you want to take them to the first sub area, I think it's the TOD East. We can chat about that. I'll stop talking and let you go over this again.
Yeah, and I guess, again, the way these three sub-areas are broken down, we provide a high level what the sub-area is trying to accomplish, talk about the intent of the land use programs that were developed, and then ultimately how the plan itself was developed or worked out. So, again, going through TOD East, providing that mixed use, multifamily, mixed use office, the Wake Tech connection, and then open space. The primary uses through here, all supporting that TOD principle, transit-oriented development principle. So you'd have mixed use, so ground floor commercial in this area with office above, and then ground floor commercial in some areas through here with office above. And then through the yellow space, it's mixed use, so commercial on the ground floor for a majority of the buildings that are fronting these new connections that we're making. And then there are some standalone multifamily buildings. So is there any questions about the land use programs and the development programs as it relates to the TOD East area? I think we just wanted to make sure, because this is such a...
Yeah, you guys were unanimous last time and the direction for this, so we were hoping that we captured your thoughts. You all wanted a walkable mixed-use district directly integrated with future Wake County Transit, so, Go Triangle Transit. So, just wanted to show this visually in a conceptualization.
Yep.
If you could indicate to Michelle via the chat system if you want to make any comments on this.
Nothing.
I guess silence is golden. Brad.
All right, yeah, that's great. Well, I guess we nailed that one.
All right,
so moving on.
Crimmins Extension. So same thing, and again, this is a very large area that we're dealing with. And I think breaking this down into these mix of land uses, and again, for those that might recall, we're really striving to show how this could be broken up into different planning pods or development pods, and then ultimately that might even be how this phases out. So, the brown showing multifamily pockets, showing commercial options, lodging is that lighter pink, industrial where it's adjacent to current industrial and makes sense with its connections. Trying not to front McCrimmon Parkway with industrial. Some corporate office options up to the north, east. Some corporate office connections to what's adjacent to already some corporate office uses. The weight competition center that's already being built out, and just kind of integrating that between the multifamily and the commercial options, and then. Tying back to the importance of open space when you're planning in an area of this size, you want to make sure that you don't lose sight of preserving as much of that open space as you can, and accommodating some of the grade challenges and just the open tree canopy. So any questions about this land use program, the development program,
just to give you,
and the visualization? I guess there's a couple other things I wanted to talk about, but go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I was just saying, just to recap what you all thought about that. From what we heard, you liked the diverse mix of uses. We showed you an alternative that was the status quo version. It was an industrial kind of swath of industrial flex. You all were very strongly opposed to this entire corridor being all industrial flex. You did want to ensure that there was diversity in the uses, that this didn't all turn into a corridor of multifamily or one single use. So what we tried to do, and what Nick's, I think, done a good job of, is sprinkle it in kind of evenly around the concept. Knowing that this is just a concept, it's really there to show you the A, mix of uses, B, some of the design characteristics that we talked about in the design principle section, and then C, scale, how large the buildings we envision this area to have.
Yeah, and I think to really drill in on the multifamily to get clarification, if there is concern about what that multifamily development pattern would look like. So here we're showing multifamily close to or adjacent to McCrimmon's Parkway. So this would be that vertical multifamily, so you have multi-level. I think in the graphic that we're showing here, the multifamily adjacent to McCrimmon's does not include like large portions of commercial. So these would be standalone multifamily buildings. So I think in discussing this in the past, this was the direction that we thought was most appropriate. Focusing the commercial in some of these nodes, and then letting the multifamily buildings be standalone multifamily buildings. But that is something that I think we're looking for confirmation on the direction that we've taken this graphic or this concept.
Yeah, we're showing standalone uses pretty much, yeah. But we're open. So in the text we talk about, this is conceptually, we did standalone horizontally mixed use concept, but we'd be interested to know if if this is okay, or you'd prefer vertical integration of uses. We do encourage it in our plan already, but if you want to make that the primary focus, that's something you could give us feedback on. Or if you're fine with the horizontal mix, we're fine with that too.
I think Sanjay would like to make a comment. Go ahead, Sanjay.
I think we ought to take a look at how do you mix vertically. I mean, the concept where you had commercial at the lower level and homes at the top. It kind of also aligns with the comment it made during public comment as well. What I found out in a recent trip to Austin, in Dominion Drive area or Barnett area, is a lot of younger generation people want to be in close proximity to work, residents, and areas where they can get food, mingle with the other people, and so on and so forth. So I would say, just instead of sprinkling a few commercial areas, maybe make it more of a vibrant corridor where you can live and be able to eat, enjoy, and have a lifestyle that is close to your work as well.
Yeah.
I guess.
Sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I was to say it's sort of relative. When we say close, these commercial pockets are, I would say, walkable from these multifamily developments. If you lived here and you walked to here, that is a viable solution. But yeah, again, we're showing more of a horizontal mix of uses here. It is possible to kind of integrate some commercial. I don't believe it's realistic that on every one of these buildings that front McCrimmon that there'd be and I know that's not what you're saying. I'm just saying just conceptually that's something that could be incorporated, just as there could be some multifamily components that might get integrated or adjacent to some of these commercials. So this is by no means meant to be the ultimate build out, but we do want to make sure that it is something that this group agrees with, that if someone came in with one or the other, would you be opposed to one of them? And I think what I'm hearing, or at least what we anticipated from the group, was you would be open to those two options, either a mix of uses horizontally or a mix of uses vertically.
That is correct. And at least I will be open to that, as long as, we don't get to a point where we keep on approving one model after another and then run out of space for doing, let's say commercial, and we just end up being all homes, or end up being just commercial and not homes. Right? So that's a mix that we will have to somehow figure out, is when people come to us with site plans or anything else, how do you encourage them to be either mixed use or have a proportion between commercial, residential, and business, kind of equally distributed?
I can answer that, Nick. So I'll take a stab at it, and Nick can step in here. So there's multiple different ways you can space out, for instance, multifamily, for instance, you can do spatial requirements, you can do special use permits, you can say, you use conditional rezoning tools where, basically council would have full control over this area and how it sort of gets developed through code. Conceptually here, obviously we're just showing something so folks know what it could potentially look like. But you can get we require a sketch plan, for instance, when we do conditional rezonings. You could totally reject something that you feel is inappropriate for this corridor. If you start seeing incrementally too much of one use, you can certainly not approve any more of that use, or at least time out until other uses fill in. And sometimes developers will come back with conditions, voluntary conditions, where they incorporate more of a mix of use, and so that's certainly an option that it could be done. Yeah, and again, a majority of this area is covered in the business activity area, which I think has that mix of uses. So we talk about establishing what those principles are. So again, those are things that you get to tie this back to. So not only do you use this graphic and this section to sort of guide some of the decision making, but you can go back to those sections and kind of pull those out as specifically, this is what we're looking to achieve. Those mixed use centers, those residential opportunities. Like this does accommodate a wide variety of uses and a wide variety of development products. Yeah, one thing that's nice about not having, single family residential, as you know, we are not allowed to regulate design standards for, or we're very restricted in what we can regulate with single family. And since we're not proposing any single family development in this area, it's multifamily or commercial and office, we have a lot of leeway with how we would like, or how the council could sort of offer feedback on what we feel like this corridor should look like. And so developers could look to this and say, we're expecting certain design standards to be implemented in this corridor. We're expecting certain mixes. We don't want one thing just dominating this whole area. And council, was very clear about that when we showed them the kind of basic sub areas that we showed you all earlier with the colored blocks and the parcels. They don't want to see something like apartments dominate the entire strip of McCrimmon. They want to see them well integrated with office, and to one of the members' points, I can't remember who made it, but have a mixed-use, walkable, active streetscape or corridor where folks can walk to different uses and not have to get in their car, et cetera. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks.
Any other questions about McCrimmon Extension?
Great, thank you.
We can move on.
Okay. And then the town center, again, I think this is probably the most well-vetted site, just based on the discussions that had happened before as we went through the town center immersive 3D model project last summer. And again, just coming back, we almost kind of backed into this land use program based on the reporting that came out of using City Engine, which is a GIS tool that lets us evaluate when you start to increase the building heights or increase the density of this area, what are the impacts on parking, how much commercial space are we including, how many units of residential are we proposing, and starting to find that right balance. And ultimately, it was town council's decision to move forward with that denser alternative 2 that shows, and I'll jump down, shows this as a more built-out town center. So you have that 3 and 4 story buildings. You would be incorporating parking decks into your ultimate solution to be able to park out all these different uses, be it residential, commercial, and office. And again, I would hope that this reflects, I know there were some minor changes, many of which were discussions that we had with staff. I think originally that the wetland center, this cultural center, was in the floodplain, I think. So that got shifted back over, and we had to adjust the parking a little bit. But I don't think there were any significant changes that came out of it. A lot of that went to the work session and the web scenes that we produced in the past. So are there any questions specific to the town center, be it this overall visualization or the overall, or the land use program that we developed?
Chris would like to speak.
I just have a question. If you spoke with shop owners, this seems to have a lot of shopping in it, and you use the example of this as an experience versus shopping. A lot of the boutiques are empty, so people enjoy the experience of walking through shopping, but most of the boutiques aren't doing well in some of the shopping centers. So is there a contingency plan that if there's high vacancies, that all these nice awnings, all these little shops and boutiques in these walkable areas aren't utilized? Is there something else that could be put in there longer term if consumer shopping trends have greatly changed?
Nick, I could take a stab at it first, and then, of course, please feel free to step in. So that's a great question. That's a very good question, and thank you for asking that. So we've talked a bit about this, especially with COVID happening, it's kind of changing a lot of the retail dynamic. It was changing anyway with online retail, but now it's, kind of in full tailspin. We don't know where it's going to land. We hope that it recovers. One thing that we would ask, and this would be a very specific nitty-gritty design requirement that I think, Nick didn't want to get into because it's more of a code thing and their scope is more land use planning, but one thing you could do is you could build the ground floor commercial to, retail specs, 15-foot ceilings, large entryways, large windows, and then temporarily house, office space or flex space, or not flex space, but work from home space, or like WeWork. Think of that. And as time moves on and the area becomes more popular, or there's more residential customer base being built in that area, you could then convert it easily to a retail component or restaurant or whatever, service use, you name it. But I think building it to that spec first is key. If you just immediately say, well, retail's not doing well, single use multifamily, there you go. It's much harder to come back later and retrofit that for retail. And Nick, if you have anything else to add.
I would agree with that. I mean, there's several examples of communities that we've worked in where I think they made the mistake of going with the use that they have now as opposed to the use that they ultimately wanted and what the plan originally set out to propose. And I think there's also a possibility to accommodate office, like Brad's saying, in the shorter term. And then this does ebb and flow. I mean, it isn't just a current trend. There's times when office is doing a lot better, and I think as long as it's adhering to the design criteria and the character that you're trying to achieve, there are ways to have office spaces still within context of like a town center. It still feels like there's that transparency on the ground floor. It's not this blank wall. You're not staring into a cubicle, things like that. But that's certainly things that you could encourage or see appropriate along some of these stretches. You definitely want to make sure along Carolina Street that is a retail hub on the ground floor, services, retail, restaurants. But you could start to see as it transitions away some opportunities to be a bit more flexible if you needed to in the short term.
Thank you.
Josh,
It looks
I
like
think
there's
you
some
wanted to make a comment.
First, I just want to say the inclusivity of the public and community in this land use plan and the exhaustive scope of what is considered for future development is just really impressive. So just want to commend you, gentlemen, for that.
Thank you.
I'm glad that Chris mentioned the repurposing of retail space, because that leads into what I wanted to talk about or ask a question about, which is the parking decks. I know that I think y'all said that you did want those or recommended those, and that is also something that I think needs to be considered as being easily retrofitted. I know that that's much more expensive to build a parking deck that can be retrofitted, because of course they'll have to have reinforced floors and such. But is that something that could be a stipulation? Would that be prohibitive to developers? If you could just speak a little bit about that, because I think that might also run into some of the same problems that, the retail spaces might.
Yeah, I mean, there are examples of that having been done. I can't think of one. I'm trying to think of one maybe in your region, and maybe Brad has better context for that, but it's definitely a cost. I mean, it's a pretty substantial cost to do a retrofit unless they're done with it in mind that that's ultimately how it's going to end. I mean, in the next 15 or 20 years, it's going to be retrofitted to a use. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think longer term, not shorter term. I mean, I don't think the car is going away as fast as sometimes we think it is. But I do think this plan needs to be responsive, and the community needs to be responsive to the fact that there are changes in transportation patterns. And even what we're showing here, I think lessening some of the requirements and looking at more shared options are things that we've already explored. I know when we went through this web scene example, this isn't nearly as parked as traditional zoning codes would require it. We're already anticipating the fact that you don't need 2 spots per a unit or anything like that. We're being pretty aggressive on the amount of parking that we're providing, and I think there's only 2 frontages, and that's something else to consider. Is we don't want the parking deck to be a prominent feature, so it's very intentional that it's tucked away in both of the parking deck scenarios. So it's not something that you see when you come in from Carolina. Other than some signage, it shouldn't be something that is obstructing the view.
Yeah, and I'll add to Nick's points, which I think covered it really well. We do mention in the plan, and just this is an emerging technology, so we can't predict exactly how it's going to go. But if driverless vehicles become mainstream, where folks aren't needing as much parking storage as they typically used to when they own their own vehicle, and ride sharing becomes more popular, and cars are just kind of circulating and picking up folks, dropping them off, and large surface lots aren't really necessary. We'd ask that, or the plan recommends that the town kind of re-examine its parking requirements, its minimum parking requirements, even maybe its maximum parking requirements, having some of those, and then potentially retrofitting parking areas, including decks, to other uses. We were thinking more infill for surface lots, putting more uses on those, but hadn't thought about parking decks. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to be designed with the floor heights in mind, which is very can be cost prohibitive, but it's not impossible. I mean, they're pretty solid concrete structures and footings, so something worth exploring.
Yeah.
Good. No, thank you. Yeah, I know they've done it in Seattle and out west where
Yeah,
they're in
I've seen it out west, but it's a demand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a demand on space, unlike I think anything
Right,
we're
right.
seeing now.
Absolutely.
But in 15 years, I mean, who knows? You just don't know if development occurs. Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Sanjay, I think Sanjay has another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was about the Pew House area. Did I hear you, Brad, say that you don't want to make it high density, or you want to change the land use of that just because the owners don't want to move out now? But yeah, if you're talking 15, 20 years from now, why would you not designate that area to be, the other side of Morrisville Carpenter Road could be also developed to be a vibrant space.
Yeah, and I think I remember you actually making these comments specifically about, I think, the area around the Page House, further south of Morrisville Carpenter Road. You were wondering if there could be redevelopment around that historic structure to kind of showcase it. I think that's what you said, right?
Yes, exactly. Because otherwise, think about it this way, right? What is going to bring people to the Pew House or Page House? Right? Nobody is going to necessarily venture out to the other side. You want to make that area attractive as well, especially along that corridor coming up all the way up to Town Hall Drive. All that area could be made very much attractive and bring people to that side of the road as well.
Yeah, and I can say we don't necessarily disagree with that. I will say that we have received some alternative feedback about having higher density or redevelopment occur around that specific area. I can certainly, if there's a consensus on the board, I can certainly bring that up again and just see if we can better define exactly what you want them to know. It makes sense. You want to have some preservation, but also some redevelopment potential so it can really shine. So we definitely aren't opposed to that.
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't do anything, what would come up there? That's maybe the flip side of it is, you can help me understand, is if you leave it the way it is, what would be the development on that side of the house?
Yeah, and I think that. Yeah, I think if we would move away from, so I think right now it's low density residential, what we're showing in the future land use map, but if we'd probably maintain more of a single family residential character if we went up, so maybe medium density, but we would want to respect the historic nature of that little area. So
sure, yeah. Absolutely.
That's something we can. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but that's something we can certainly broach with when we go to council. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in or weigh in on that. No comment. Well, I guess no silence is agreement. I can't tell. That's not. I'm interested in that as well. We can certainly bring that up with them. We've gotten general feedback, certainly, to stop allowing for higher density residential west of NC 54. We've tried to minimize it in every area we can, but it doesn't seem unreasonable to have that be medium density residential or something like that.
Yeah, I would recommend that, maybe like what the various options here given for town center, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps the council might benefit from some kind of visualization of how that area might look like. Right? They may decide not to do anything about it, but at least looking on the other side of the road might give them a perspective of the art of possible.
Did you hear that, Nick? He wants a visualization of how it would look on the other side of the road.
I did hear that.
He's crying right now. No, that's actually that's a really good point. And Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think it's certainly not in the town center scope here, but it's a concept that I do think the town should continue to explore. I do feel like we talked about this before. It might be something that in the land use policy we just need to be a little bit more flexible to accommodate that kind of option in the future. Are there other questions related to the town center that anybody else has? It didn't look like it. I just want to make sure.
I think everybody was good with that, but I will, if you're going to do something conceptual for the south side of Morrisville Carpenter, I can give you a very good starting point.
Yeah, Chairperson Pritchard, I think you were integral with the town center plan, the 2007 town center plan, so I definitely expect as much. So,
so anybody who didn't get that, there was a very, very nice town center plan published in 2009, and it showed a very attractive area around the Pugh House and the Page House. So I encourage you to look it up.
All right, Nick, I think the last one.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this now in from a couple different perspectives, but just coming back to RDU and the airport overlay, and what we're recommending at this point is shifting a portion of this area. So what's shown in orange would be an extended airport overlay of AOB. So what was at one point AOA on the east side of Chapel, on the east side of NC 54. We're proposing that all be a part of AOB, and the reason that is it allows for other uses that in the past were just not considered in this area. So it opens it up for more opportunity. And again, this is a policy recommendation. There would be additional regulatory or additional amendments that would need to be made. You need to update the standards and the boundaries of the airport overlay district based on what we're talking about here today, and continuing to evaluate data and information received from the FAA, continuing to update the standards of the airport overlay district. If there's hazards or nuisances or any of those other design considerations that I think are already things that we're talking about, but as it's related more specifically to like best practices for airport construction, or construction around airports. There's a lot of examples of this, across the country for airport-related or airport-adjacent development. So I think that's probably the biggest discussion point inside the airport overlay, is just that shift in that extended airport overlay and bringing that across to that orange. And then that opens up some of the development options that we show in the McCrimmon extension graphic and sub-area plan. So any specific questions here?
It may be because I'm dense and it's late, but I find that those colors very difficult to understand. I think what you're saying is that the existing restrictions extended to the west of 54, and that you're in that orange part, you're saying that it would be less restrictive.
So right now.
So now.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I guess for the airport overlay, so AOB, and we talk about it over here, or in the document, but basically, you're shifting. Maybe these colors are a little confusing. I see what you're saying. So the airport overlay, so this is AOB, and now we're saying this, we're recommending that this be AOB as well.
Yeah, what would probably help is a blue or something, maybe a hatch mark or something like that.
It was one before and one after.
Yeah, maybe that.
No, you're right. That's confusing. I see what you're saying.
That's a good point. Thank you.
I'm still dense, but I think I understand it more.
Yeah, so essentially we would recommend, so the area in blue to the left is AOB, which is less restrictive. The area, basically everything you see to the east of 54 that's colored is AOA. We would recommend shifting some of AOA to AOB.
Okay. All right, next question.
Right, and then the reason that is that allows for uses such as multifamily, residential, schools, as long as there's some of the design criteria for noise attenuation and other standards put in place for developments that are there. So basically, orange and blue are now going to all be AOB.
Very good.
Based on this policy recommendation.
Okay, next question. The two pointy bits, correspond with the two runways, the 10,000-foot runway and the 7,500. There's a proposal, I don't know whether it'll ever happen, but they seem to be still pushing that within the RDU authority. But there'll be a third runway to the north. So, yeah, up a bit and to your left.
Yeah, it's up.
So, yeah, but that means the noise contour, for example, will extend more towards the northwest.
True.
So are you thinking about that as you do this?
Yeah, we purposely left the former outlet mall area, what they call the Stitch now, I think is the project they're working on, out of that amendment area specifically for the third runway. RDU was very adamant about their third runway plans. I should say we have an RDU official on our technical advisory committee. Doesn't mean they're in favor of what we're proposing, but they've provided a lot of great feedback in terms of the technical reasons why why they support the current airport noise overlay. They are, from what I understand, they're having some funding issues with getting actual third runway, not to mention other facilities. There's a lot of grand plans for RDU that may not materialize in the near term, but they want to ensure that future operations aren't impeded by our land use decisions. And so that's why we left that piece off, because from what they showed us, the runway is sort of north of their current facility.
Parallel to the 10,000.
It's not that far now.
I'm sorry, what?
It's not that far away from the current. I mean, like back at one point, they considered having it really, separate from that. But I think now it's almost like the current runway turns into a taxiway to the new runway. So instead of it being like or half a mile, it's like 500 feet.
No, you're right. It would be. I think you're exactly right. I think there's actually a little strip of land that's cleared. If you went on Google Maps and you were like on satellite mode, you could see the cleared strip where they'd, I think there's like a little road there now, but where they'd put that runway.
Yeah, and I guess, and I know this group knows this, and I know we've talked about this in many different discussions, but it's a self-imposed it's a self-imposed overlay. So I think making this policy decision and moving this discussion forward is certainly within the town's right to do, and it does open it up to a lot of the use options that everybody is looking for and a more desirable mix. So going back to the land use program for McCrimmon, when we originally showed, we had two different options, two different alternatives. And alternative one had the uses that would be, representative of the uses that are in AOA now. So if we were to keep orange as AOA, these are the uses that would have been appropriate. And it was very clear from the PGB, but also from town council and working with staff, that is not and property owners in this area. It's not the direction McCrimmon wants to develop in the future. So this is a policy change that really does need to be made for those other opportunities like multifamily to be possible here.
Yeah, I've as recently as July spoke or was in communication with FAA officials, some higher up FAA officials who are kind of in charge of, or at least can point me in the right materials for noise compatibility standards. And in our communications, they provided me some literature of showing exactly what the standards are as of today, whether or not they're going to change them anytime soon. They provided a nice chart. It's kind of a matrix chart showing which uses are compatible with which noise decibel zone. And so we've used that along with the revised 2014 noise contours, which have significantly reduced the 65 decibel line, which is considered sort of the standard for, at least currently, for what's considered noisy or too noisy for folks. And so we've ensured that we're adhering to those FAA guidelines, even though they are voluntary.
So any questions? Other than we definitely need to fix the colors.
I mean, he's right. I can see where the confusion.
No, I was confused when I was saying it. I was like,
now that I'm looking at it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Any other questions? Doesn't look like it.
All right.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead. Was someone about to talk?
No, I was going to say, I think we can switch over to sort of general other feedback, other policies in the plan, other recommendations. I don't know if we have any sort of set format for this, but we're kind of take whatever comments come our way.
Well,
I was going to say go section by section. I want to make sure it's clear. Tonight is not the last opportunity for anybody to provide us their comments. So if we'd hope that everybody had an opportunity to read this document. I acknowledge this is a long document to digest. If there's things that through the presentation tonight you saw and maybe wanted to dig into and want to follow up with us, please know that is obviously an option. We don't want anybody to feel like they can't talk to us over the next couple of weeks. So that's fully the intent here. So yeah, if you have a question, we can definitely go through it tonight. Otherwise, I think Brad, if they have questions, should they go directly to you? That'd be the best route. What's the right route?
Well, I was going to ask Brad and Michelle, what are your plans for this plan going forward? Is it going to come back to us next month now that we've had time to think about it, or are you going to take it straight to the town center?
So we are, ideally, we're going to go to, so right in between you and going to town council, there is a public engagement campaign going on. It's fortunately, due to COVID, we can't do the in-person events that we had initially planned in this process, but we do have an online platform on our project website available for public comment. We have the actual plan, and we have the frequently asked questions sheet that you all saw in your packet. We're sending out postcards to all the property owners in town, and we are also doing a social media campaign. Well, I say campaign, it's more just using those channels to advertise the plan. And so once we get feedback, and also we are sending email blasts to stakeholders, including our technical advisory committee members who will give us some more technical feedback, including RDU. And so we're planning to go back to town council late September with this plan, incorporating some of your feedback, relaying that to town council. Also feedback from other folks in the public and as well as the stakeholders. And then hopefully we'll have a more final draft in the fall. And then we, anticipate if that goes smoothly, if we've addressed your concerns as best as we possibly could, and you're happy with that, fall would move into potential town council review in maybe December, January, and adoption around January, February. And again, this is an ideal situation. So
I think I'd like to suggest that we, unless anybody has a really burning question they'd like to bring up, I think we should bring it to a close now and take opportunity as members of the public to participate going forward. So if anybody has a burning question, please indicate to Michelle. Okay. So, all right. And I think I'd like to thank you, Nick, for your presentation and bearing with us as we had this discussion.
Sure thing.
And we can move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the plan. We appreciate it.
So you want to move on to staff comments, Michelle?
And while the newsletters being brought up, I think I alluded to earlier, did want to have a brief conversation with the board about potentially holding a special meeting at the end of September for the purpose of reviewing the sign code. I think you saw in the PowerPoint a September 10th date. We still do need to get the final draft online, and we want to make sure that we have about a month for public input on that. We really wanted to run two options by you. One would be holding a special meeting on the fourth Thursday of September, which is September 24th, where we would just focus on that sign code. It's a big document, and it's going to take some time to get through. Or as an alternative, we could bring it to you at your October meeting. We really don't want to do it any longer than October. I think there's a desire to get this wrapped up. As you can see, it's a project that's been in the works for a while. We always take our best stab at kind of anticipating what's coming to you. So I'm going to tell you right now, it looks like you have about 3 items on your October agenda. That could change. We could end up with not that much. It's a little early to anticipate. But when we're looking at that October agenda right now, seeing the possibility that you might be 2 or more hours in before we would get to a code review is really why we wanted to throw out September 24th as another option. So just be aware, if we do put it on in October, that could potentially be a long night. But really just whatever the board would prefer.
So I think I would prefer to focus on that one thing on one evening. So I would go for the separate meeting, but let me go around the table. Let me start with Chris, because
I would agree with that. Separate meeting.
Thank you, Chris. Lee, what's your opinion?
I agree. It'd be better to try to spread it out so we don't get so late.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, separate meeting.
Kenneth?
I agree.
Sanjay?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And Josh?
Yep, I agree.
I think we're going to have a separate meeting.
Well, thank you. I know it is an additional night and additional time, so thank you. I appreciate
What was the
you
date?
willing to do that.
What was the date that you were proposing?
Thursday, September 24th. And then we are planning on we're making final tweaks to the draft right now. It should be, fingers crossed, online Monday or Tuesday, which will give us a month to get some input on it before it would come to you.
Okay, we have your newsletter.
Okay. Go through that just very quickly. No new site plan applications submitted in July. We did approve one new site plan, construction plan application. That was for a project known as School Village. It's a small kind of neighborhood shopping center use at the corner of Davis Drive and Parkside Valley. No town council approvals in July. And under other news, very sad to report that over the month of July, we did have 2 resignations in the planning department. Natalie and I gave birth to a bouncing baby boy just about a month ago. Thrilled for her, but she is relocating back up north with family and won't be returning to us. And then transportation planner Dylan Bruckhouse will also be leaving us. His last day is August 21st.
That's mixed news. Oh, it's a shame. We've lost those. So that's another responsibility for you then, Michelle, just when you needed extra things to do.
The team is always chipping in various ways. And I don't think long-range planning manager Hal would mind me minding 2 a.m. this morning. He and his wife gave birth to a baby boy as well.
Terrific.
He is now officially on paternity leave.
Wow.
We're running a skeleton crew here.
For him.
Well, congratulations and best wishes to him and his new family then. That's great. Okay, we'll move on to board comments. Lee, any comments?
No comments. Thank you.
Sanjay.
Comments. Thank you for the team and Brad, especially for enduring this long call, but I appreciate all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth.
No comments.
Tim.
No comments.
Josh.
No comments.
Chris.
Just, I thought the land use plan was beautiful, so I think that was great work. It really was impressive of how it was put together. It's a great sales presentation as well as detailed.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'll let Nick know.
So, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but just to give you an idea of how big 70 acres is, that's the size of the Savan development.
Wow.
I'm not sure how many people asked Kerry to make that a high school, but just saying. Is it possible to get a copy of the land use plan in printed form?
Yeah, we can. It won't be as nice and crisp.
I don't want it this big.
I know. Yeah, you and Michelle are kindred spirits because she has the same issue. Yeah, we can make an attempt to print it for you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yeah. If anybody else wants that, now is the time to speak, because I find it hard to go through 85 pages on a screen. But I'm a Luddite. Okay. I don't think anybody's about to expire. I think item 10 we can skip. So item 11, anybody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to end the day.
Second.
A motion and a second. One final time.
All right,
Marty,
one last
roll call.
time. Member Archaria.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Langston.
Aye.
Member Sack.
Aye.
Member Terry.
Aye.
Sharon Fisher.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. I know it's been a relatively late
Thank you.
session.
Thank you.
That's it.
Good night, everyone.